All right, guys, we're going to give this a second shot. I'm not sure what happened earlier. OBS just kind of crapped out on me. And as that happened, I didn't know what to do other than shut down the stream and try and reassess and start it back up a little bit later. So maybe I'll be able to do this today. And if not, then I guess I'll have to break it down and see if I can do another stream later on. Although, with that circumstance, fortunately, I was able to call in over to Christian Watson's show, which he does a really good job. A very young man does a very good job of breaking down the epistemological fallacies of critical race theory. And so just chatted with him, came on the show real quick, got lucky to be the caller in, and with that was able to make a real quick connection, and hopefully we'll have him over here on this show, because I'm probably going to have more people on occasion over here. Or I should say more people. I'm going to start having people on occasion over here. Maybe we'll have them over on the Ends Justify the Memes, but we'll develop that relationship. So, bad things happen sometimes and end up being quite good. So, guys, I know there's not a lot of people here yet, but as you were coming to pour in, the idea of the stream today was to celebrate the anniversary of the channel, celebrate the birth of my new daughter, and of course, allow you all to make any sort of donations if you wish. I'm only streaming right now on YouTube and Entropy. If you wish to make a donation, if you want to congratulate me and my family in any way, shape, or form, you could do that over on Entropy. It is not a necessity. I will be here streaming either way. What you can really do, though, really, truly, honestly, to help me out, is like, share, subscribe. Come share this out somewhere on the forums you're at, the Discords, the whatever they might be. If you think I do a good job, share it out. Also, those likes and all that stuff, very helpful for the algorithm, because the stuff I talk about is not necessarily ranked up there. So, with that said, thanks, Thane. I appreciate you being here, partner. With that said, let's get into some topics. I was covering some stuff earlier, and again, the stream cut out. Apparently, I didn't have any sound for a few minutes. Given that my OBS was set up earlier in the week and decided to remove one of the applications of my microphone on another scene. But hey, is what it is. Eventually, perhaps I'll just run straight from StreamYards. But, right now I'm trying to be cheap. So, trying to be cheap. So, let's get some stuff up here. Now, I did cover earlier, it's about all I covered, was a thread from the what is it? Oh, good Lord, now I done forgot. Lost my train of thought there. What is it? Cultural Husbandry. It was a thread from Cultural Husbandry and all of the lies of the left and how they were truths, right? It's a little bit facetious. And I did that to show you how this has been going on forever and ever. Now, many of you are aware of this. If you watch me already, you understand that the manipulation goes on. What we're going to focus on here in the beginning is the greatest threat ever to the United States, and that is the domestic threat of Whyte Supreme Pizzas. White supremacy! So, I'm just going to pick up there. If you want to watch the first part, go watch it. It was only like 20 minutes. Probably wasn't that great. It's whatever. It's the whole issue with live streaming in general. It's very, very variable. So here, this is from Snopes. This is from 2017. It says, are Antifa and the alt-right equally violent? Violence has been ratcheting up on all sides during white supremacist rallies in recent months. So here, immediately, they framed it as white supremacist rallies, which they weren't. Now, there might have been some supremacists, some supreme pizzas over there, but I don't think that was the majority of the people. But of course, to the left, anything that isn't within their ideology, which is a supremacist ideology, mind you, is white supremacy. It is to hold everyone back and down. They say free markets, free exchange, the voluntary exchange of ideas and products is white supremacy. They think that that is somehow some form of oppression. It's quite odd to me. Let's go down here. See what we got. In the hours and days following the deadly Unite the Right rally on 12 August 2017, President Donald Trump laid the blame for the violence that took the lives of 3 people in Charlottesville on many sides. No, he didn't, Snopes. You didn't fact check that. He denounced the white supremacists, and he said there were good people on both sides, the left and the right. I think what he was trying to allude to is folks were confused. I'm not the biggest Trumpster. I supported the president only because, well, the system is utterly corrupt, and I thought we needed that wrecking ball. But he definitely had his flaws. And no matter what, he's always going to be framed as the bad guy because he was not part of the in crowd, and that's the way it works. The claim that white supremacists and counter demonstrators carry equal responsibility for the weekend melee in Charlottesville has been widely rejected. Both Democrat and Republican lawmakers have repudiated the views espoused by rally attendees who were seen using racist and anti-Semitic epithets and carry Nazi symbols. But the president's comments have drawn attention to the far left demonstrators known as Antifa, short for anti-fascist, who have been shown to counter white supremacist rallies, sometimes violently. No, they just attack random people. If you recall last year, someone was shot in the street. Patriot prayer guy just walking down the street. Guy came out, ambushed him, shot him, and then had a shootout with the feds. Yet apparently not a domestic terrorist threat. Not in any way, shape, or form. Quite odd how that works. However, videos of a car ramming into a group of pedestrians protesting a rally doesn't show any Antifa in the crowd that was hit. Instead, Heather Heyer, the 32-year-old woman who was killed, was a Charlottesville local, and many of the people in the area appeared to be regular demonstrators. Yeah, because the guy who did that had no motivation. He just did it. Maybe he was having his car surrounded. I don't know. We don't know why, because that's been highly suppressed, but it looks like he was panicked or troubled or whatever. Doesn't matter what his ideology is. I remember someone telling me some years ago when this happened, but someone died there. I'm like, people die every day that you don't care about. You care that they die because someone might have an idea in their head, and somehow that idea is related to their death. Interestingly, the woman that died, if I'm not mistaken, was a white woman. So how he was suppressing people of color, as they now say, instead of colored people, because somehow, they mean different things. Somehow him killing a white woman was supremacy of people of color. Again, this just doesn't stand on just the basic truths of it. But in any case, I'm not going to go through all of this. What I want to see is what they have to say. Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging in? What about the alt-left that came charging in, as they say, the alt-right? Do they have a semblance of guilt? And so, again, this goes through here, blah, 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 blah. And in the end, of course, you guys know what Snopes is going to rate this as. No. Let me turn off my dark mode. Might make this a little bit easier. Oh, where in the world have we lost it? Have we lost it? Oh, these are just fact checks, but I guess we don't have a definitive answer here. I don't really see one. When Antifa shows up to fight, they can't play into the game plan. They're turning the traditional desire of the objectivity of the media on its head. The media doesn't have traditional desire of objectivity. That's just absurd. And then there's the thing about the Jay-Z lyric. Yeah, and I just don't see where this really fact checks it or not. It has sources, but it frames it all as if it was the left. Or sorry, it was the right. Oh, if I can even speak today, folks. Frames it all as if it were the right. What about AG Merrick Garland, right? He just said this the other day. We all know about this. AG Merrick Garland says, white supremacists, the most dangerous threat to our democracy. Merrick Garland told Congress that white supremacists represent the greatest danger to America right now. His testimony was a gross distortion of reality. It is nothing more than an attempt to reinforce the narrative pushed by Democrats and media since January of this year. Long before that, partner. You need to get with it. But hey, whatever. This has been going on in the United States for decades, but ramped up specifically, at least since 2012. Since the rise of Antifa and BLM in the United States. Now, what's it say here? White supremacy is the top security threat, Garland says. Attorney General Merrick Garland told Congress on Wednesday that violent incident by white supremacists pose the most dangerous threat to our democracy. That assertion reflects near universal consensus among national security experts, including those who work for the Trump administration. Garland's warning came during the Senate Appropriations Committee hearing on the 6th riot. It says, in the video of Garland's testimony below, he lumps the January 6th Capitol rioters in with the KKK, which he fails to mention was an outgrowth of the Democrat Party, the Unabomber, and the Oklahoma City bomber. Look, the Unabomber was more of an environmentalist and basically anti-technology, lived on his own. I don't know if we could call him right-wing, old Uncle Ted in any way, shape, or form, but we could say Timothy McVeigh was. However, he didn't attack the federal building because of white supremacy. Now, did he? If you read and you understand what McVeigh's motivations were, he was doing it as a retaliatory response to the federal government being overseas and murdering children in foreign nations. In fact, by many standards, that motivation people might think of as left-wing. Now, I'm not saying it is or isn't. I don't find it to be either. I just don't see how you can lump that in with white supremacy. It doesn't work. But this is what they said. This is what they state. Now I'm going to show you some of the actual data. I just want to build this up a little bit. And obviously, you probably are aware of this, but I want to look through this from many different perspectives. At 4:15, Garland says, when someone tries to promote or impose an ideology through acts of violence, those acts can be the most dangerous crimes we confront as a society. Interesting, because I'm more than certain that Antifa and BLM have been burning down cities for a year now, and they're ramping up. They're being released by the district attorneys, state's attorneys, whatever it may be in any case. Sometimes they're not even arrested, but if they are, they're often just, catch and release. And we know that Derek Chauvin in his trial was under a high amount of public scrutiny and terroristic threats. And there were still riots and violence despite what the verdict was, which is what everyone who has any sense of anything knew was going to happen. So for that verdict to come out, that was a political outcome, right? And it came about through threats of violence. That is the technical definition of terrorism, folks. Terrorism is the use or threat of violence to get political outcomes. And yet, we are trying to say in the federal government that groups like Antifa and BLM are not that, and that white supremacy is the deepest threat. It's absolutely insane. And this guy says, see many of those while waiting in gas lines. Yeah, because white supremacy is the greatest threat. So let's keep going with this, because the real kicker is this right here. So if you guys don't know, and I'm going to get into the depths of this a little bit, where this information comes from is from an organization in the University of Maryland called START, and it is the study of global terrorism. So here we have a little infographic that was released in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And this is all of the terroristic incidences from 1970 to 2013. So as we go down here, we have the author on the side, the project investigators, Gary Lafree, which we're going to talk about because he's the guy who basically pushes all of this ideology up front toward everybody. Well, hey there, Holly. Hello, you're back. Yeah, well, my stream shut down, so I just restarted. Kiefer, thank you, bud. Yeah, last Friday was the anniversary of the stream. Of course, couldn't stream because had a newborn. Family was in and out, so also not very rested. Oh, hey, looks like I got some folks over on the Entropies. Full Fling OZ, Oz. We're the only threat. Brown people can't even feed themselves and their children. Yeah, no joke, man. That is the way they look at it. It's quite ridiculous. It's quite ridiculous to call people who want everyone to be free generally and go about and mind their own business and do their own thing and live peaceful lives as supremacist, while the folks that are pushing that ideology, that all of us liberty-minded folks are supremacist, are saying that, yes, people of more melanated skin, of certain ethnicities, they just can't. They can't do things for themselves unless we take care of them like little children. It's absolutely absurd. I'll outmath Andrew Yang while dunking on Michael Jordan. I am a supreme. All right, guys. So, by the way, once again, there is an Entropy if you wish to donate. Greatly appreciated. Old Val donated a few bucks before my stream cut out. But like I said, if you're just joining, that gave me the opportunity to be over on Christian Watson's channel for a few minutes, and that was fruitful. That was good. So hopefully, I'll get him over here sometime in the future. Very intelligent young man who really likes dissecting critical race theory. I'm going to try and get Aiden Paladin over on this channel as well here maybe next week. I know Aiden's willing to come on, and hopefully we'll talk about some of these things on a deeper level. And obviously, Aiden has a wealth of expertise as she goes through the literature quite often. In any case, let's get back to this. So START's Global Terrorist Database contains information on more than 125,000 domestic and international terrorist attacks that occurred between 1970 and 2013. Collectively, these attacks have resulted in more than 266,000 deaths and more than 354,000 injuries. So that's a lot of folks. That's nearly 1 million people. This research highlight focus on the terrorist attacks that occurred in the United States between 1970 and 1913. From 1970 through 1913, more than 2,600 terrorist attacks took place in the United States, resulting in more than 3,500 fatalities. Approximately 85% of all deaths from terrorist attacks during this period occurred in a coordinated attacks on September 11th, 2001. So 85% of all deaths of all terrorist attacks in this 30-year period were from the September 11th attacks. Nearly 80% of all terrorist attacks involved no casualties, fatalities, or injuries. So most of these attacks didn't result in anything other than probably property damage. Excuse me, guys, if I stutter a little bit today. I feel quite well rested, but I'm out of practice as far as the streaming thing goes. 2 weeks off is a long time. More than half of terrorist attacks took place during the 1970s. Between 2000 and 2013, there were fewer than 20 attacks per year on average, meaning the rates have died down significantly. And we can see this if you're watching on this chart here. And I'm going to explain to you that the majority, I'm going to show you actually, the majority of these attacks that were happening in the 70s were actually left-wing terrorist plots. But as always, the left, they don't consider themselves these things. They get a free pass because they have the noble ideology. They are Gnostics. See, to a Gnostic, if you have the proper beliefs, it doesn't matter how you actually act in real life. It's about the inner man. It's about the person you are within yourself. And therefore, if your thoughts are correct, you are correct. Meaning you can be a horrendous, horrible person like George Floyd was, but he was correct because he maybe supposedly agreed with what the Black Lives Matter people are espousing today. I don't know. But it's something akin to that. And so the difference between that and, say, like I would say, early Christianity would be that the inner self was important, but much less important to the outer world, the outer self, and how you actually act. The inner self's always important, folks, in that it should be in an alignment with the outer self, right? I talk about this often when I get into Jungian psychology and the idea of the persona, that is the mask you wear to the world, and then the ego, the slightly the level slightly buried below that, which is always trying to protect the persona and keep down the shadow and your anima and animus. And those things are your shadow, your dark side, and the last part, that anima and animus, are the aspects of your masculine and feminine. So without going too far into this, essentially, without developing your shadow, without understanding your inner man, you will project that out. And that's what these folks do. They think that their inner man is this thing that is good, this Gnostic belief, right? But really, what they're doing is they're projecting their vileness to the world. And it's their ego and their persona, those more outer layers, that are virtuous. So a person that is truly virtuous, they'll have the majority of all those things aligned. They'll know themselves well. Or if they have certain parts of their shadow, like myself, that I'm very aware of, then I embrace those parts of me and not necessarily try to repress them, but control them, knowing that certain things aren't good for my soul. And then if I engage in certain activities, then my outer man, my outer self, the way I act around people will become worse. So hopefully that was not too convoluted for you all, but basically, I'll put it as simple as possible. These folks believe that because they have the right thoughts that they're virtuous, and it doesn't really matter how they act, but really beside what their thoughts are, they're not really aligned with their inner self anyways. And you'll see this a lot with, let's say, basic terminology, like we talk about supremacy. So we just got out of Pride Month. Now, if white pride is supremacist, why is gay pride not? It's a simple juxtaposition. But to be consistent, we have to judge those on the same level. And what they'll do, the left will do, is they'll go, well, they were oppressed for years, and therefore the blah, 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 blah. And you weren't oppressed for years, and because you weren't oppressed for years, you can't be proud. Because you were proud for too long. And it's like, I didn't live back then, guys. I don't know what I have to do with that stuff. Well, but you inherit their legacy. Whatever. In any case, long enough of a diatribe there. Let's get back to this stat. So more than half the terrorist attack took place during the 1970s. between 2000 and 2013, there were fewer than 20. So good. It seems like terrorism is lowering. Interestingly, though, this data stops right after the rise of BLM. At least on this one. So attack targets. The most frequently attacked type of target in the United States between 1970 and 2013 was business targets. Nearly 1/3 of all attacks on business targets were on banks and commerce. An additional 23% were on retail entities. Do you think that that was motivated by people who are liberty-loving, laissez-faire, free market capitalists? I mean, just saying. Terrorist attacks frequently targeted buildings and infrastructure rather than individuals. 94% of attacks against abortion-related targets were on clinics, while 6% targeted providers or personnel. Now, the abortion clinic things, I mean, that generally is something that would be on the more conservative side of things, but I don't really think that, I always say people that are willing to go and just jump and use violence, that's not generally a classically liberal or conservative type position. And again, that goes back to the thing I just said about the inner and that outer man. And some people, they're really not aligned. They don't understand that they have conflicting thoughts. 78% of attacks against educational targets were on schools, universities, or other buildings, while 22% targeted teachers or other educational personnel. 78 attacks on educational targets. Again, by whom? What were their motivations? Doesn't really say. 73% attacks against government targets were on government buildings, facilities, or offices, while 27% targeted personnel. And again, I wonder what they're classifying. Was the congressional baseball shooting classified as a terrorist attack? Should have been. Perpetrators, 2000 to 2013. Between 2000 to 2013, the vast majority of attacks in which named organizations were identified were carried out by environmental and animal rights violent extremist groups. Now, folks, what do you think animal rights groups are generally aligned with? Like, my wife works for an animal rights group that's nonpartisan. It's bipartisan. But it is not it started by basically its founders, libertarians. So it's not without it. Let's say it's not without its liberty-minded infrastructure, but they work with leftists because, as most people know, environmentalism and animal rights and those things generally are leftist causes. Now, I think they're actually causes on both sides, but as far as extremism and violence, they are always left motivated. So the next line says, however, attacks were most frequently carried out by individuals not known to be affiliated with proprietary group. These include Wade Michael Page's assault at the Sikh temple in Wisconsin in 2012, as well as Nadil Hassan's attack at Fort Hood in 2009. Now, we know that Hassan's attack was Muslim motivated. It was Islamist. I don't know about Michael Page's. Maybe he thought it was against Islamists because people confuse them with Sikhs often. I don't know that particular incident. But again, there's a list over here on the side that you all can see right now. I'm going to read off in a minute. These attacks are not from right-wing extremists. But if you say stuff like this, you give an example of, like I did many, many months ago when the Witchmer 5 came out, which of course was orchestrated by the feds. I said, right-wing violence for once? And someone commented, they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean? We had to What about what about Timothy McVeigh in the federal building? What about Waco? And I'm like, you mean when the feds came in and attacked people who weren't doing anything wrong per se? I mean, David Koresh might have been a creepy dude, and he might have been sleeping with underage women. So I'm not necessarily a fan of that, but the feds had no right to come in, period. And again, McVeigh, that's, again, part of the reason why he did what he did, right? Was because of Waco. It was because of children being bombed overseas, and then Waco. It was a retaliation for the innocents that were murdered by the federal government. It's just the reality, guys. But they brought that up, and I'm like, you're talking about stuff that happened 30 years ago. They go, oh, the Proud Boys, they're a right-wing terrorist group. Really? They're a fraternity, guys. They're a fraternity that will engage. But I never seen them stomping folks on the street like little old ladies and calling them fascist like Antifa does. Haven't seen it. If there was video evidence of it, it would be on the news 24/7, folks. So this is a matter of, we have all the evidence in the world through video. Almost every time we hear of some sort of white wing supremacist attack, it's almost always hoax hate, right? It's always almost perpetrated by the folks who are saying they're the victims for attention. We have Charlottesville, the one incident they want to bring up. Okay. But that wasn't a bunch of guys in Klan hoods either, was it? That was a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, as Trump said. And Antifa, if they had not shown up, there probably wouldn't have been any violence. Because I don't think that the people on the other side were going to start violence. It's always Antifa that starts it. 12 of the 28 attacks in 2012 and 2013 were attributed to unaffiliated individuals. Okay, so half, maybe, nearly. See, Kiefer said, nice also taught me a lot about the actual right-wing ideas. Not sure which you're referencing there, but also I bet the 4th of July is wild in West Virginia. We always have fireworks just locally. People are always shooting off fireworks. My 4th is probably not going to be anything because, baby just over a week old. See what's going over on Entropy. Nothing new there. All right. So guys, let's go down this list over here on the side. See if I can biglify this some more. Now again, it says clearly we don't know all the perpetrators per se or their affiliations. But the thing is that groups like START and the SPLC, which is a joke organization, by the way, SPLC is a joke of an organization, but they get to dictate who's who and who's affiliated with what. And they've called plenty of people right-wing, racist, extremists that aren't. Maji Nawaz, I believe, sued them and successfully for stating such things about himself. So, known perpetrators, unaffiliated individuals, 64. Earth Liberation Front, 60. Earth Liberation Front. Go look that up if you want. Let's look it up now, actually. Let's look up Earth Liberation Front. We can go right to their website, but the wiki's pretty easy. Also known as the Elves, is the collective name for an autonomous individuals or covert cells who, according to the Elf Press officials, use economic sabotage and guerrilla warfare to stop the exploitation and destruction of the environment. Does anyone think that sounds right wing? What's their website say? Subscribe to unlock the contents. Ooh. You're currently only seeing 1% of the 1,000 plus pieces of expert insight and analysis available. Well, this is from the Terrorism Research Consortium. Okay, we'll leave this up. This Earth Liberation Front. The Earth Liberation Front is a collective name for an autonomous individuals or covert cells. This is how Antifa runs, by the way. Now, this is going to tie in later on to the head of START, Mr. Lafree, who basically doesn't consider Antifa or BLM terrorist organizations because they're not affiliated enough. Yet this right here from Earth Liberation Front says that they're autonomous individuals or covert cells. Yeah. This is that, the big lie. Antifa is just an idea. Okay. According to the Elf Press Office, use economic sabotage, guerrilla warfare to stop the exploitation and destruction of the environment. Founded in Britain in 1992, it is regarded as descending from Animal Liberation Front because of the relationship and cooperation between the two movements. The Earth Liberation Front has no formal leadership hierarchy, members, or official spokesperson. It is entirely decentralized, just like Antifa. Yet somehow, they're considered a terrorist organization, but Antifa is not. Instead, consisting of individuals or cells who choose the term as a banner to use. Like ALF, ELF emerged as a derivative of another environmental organization, Earth First, which had abandoned its illegal and violent activities by 1992 and became more mainstream. The first known ELF activity in the U.S. occurred in 1996 when members set fire to United States Forest Service truck in Oregon. That was smart, environmental terrorists. Really? Set fire to a truck? In a forest? Like you might burn the whole forest down? Oh, these people, I swear. Kiefer says in Tannerite, right? And what channel in general? Yeah. No Tannerite around here. That'd be awesome, though. No Tannerite that I'm aware of. I live too much. I mean, my area is rural, but it's, little suburban enclaves and the basically I'm in a rural suburb of DC, even though I'm in West Virginia. So mind you, I want to move further west in West Virginia, more where there are no people. So Animal Liberation Front, they had 42 terrorist attacks. The anti-abortion activists. So again, we could say those are generally conservatives, right? Although, again, I don't think that most conservatives condone going out and being violent. We know the left has no problem with it. We have calls from folks in the federal government who are Democrats who are basically calling for violence. Anti-abortion activists, Coalition to Save the Preserves, 8. Al-Qaeda, 4. Neo-Nazi group. It's the first time we got one. 2. So here we have 64 unaffiliated, 60 from the Earth Liberation, 42 Animal Liberation. Coalition to Save the Preserve, that's obviously environmental. That's, another 8. And then we have 2 from the neo-Nazi group. Revolutionary Cell Animal Liberation Brigade, 2. White extremists, 2. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, 1. Anarchist, 1. The Justice Department, 1. I don't even know what that's about. It says the Justice Department. They committed an act of terrorism. I think they do it quite often, but maybe not the Justice Department, but the federal government, that is. The Ku Klux Klan, 1. Minutemen American Defense, 1. Revenge of the Trees, 1. And so forth. There's a few others there, but not very right-wing to me. In total, from the neo-Nazis, we have 2. We have, we'll exclude the abortion activists for the time being, at least. So we have 2 more of white extremists. We have 1 from the Klan, that's 5 total. Veterans for non-religious memorials. Well, I wouldn't say that's white supremacist. The Minutemen, I don't think that those are white supremacists either. But yeah, we got like 5, maybe 6, 7. And this is the greatest threat, though. The greatest threat to America right now. Domestic terrorist threat. Whyte Supreme Pizzas. Weapons used by decade. So this little chart here shows melee, firearms, others, explosives and bombs, and incendiaries. And explosive and bombs and incendiaries are the most popular. And that refers to a weapon catching fire. It's explained there. Melee, obviously, is hand-to-hand fighting. That always happens. That's what happens in the streets today. From 1970 to 2013, terrorist attacks occurred in all 50 U.S. states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. However, 50% of all attacks took place in California, New York, and Puerto Rico, the most left-wing progressive bastions in the United States. Just like the attacks in Chicago back in the 1800s got us Labor Day, we have this in the hearts and centers. And I bet if we looked at the data today, we would see it mostly in Oregon and Seattle, right? I would say Washington, but Washington as a greater whole, actually pretty based. It's just Seattle. So from 2000 to 2013, although fewer attacks occurred compared to earlier periods, terrorist attacks still occurred in 35 states and the District of Columbia. And Puerto Rico, 3 states, California, New York, and Washington State accounted for 35% of attacks. Imagine that. Imagine that. Kiefer says rookie numbers for white supremacists. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Unsuccessful attacks from 70 to 2013. 82% of all attempted attacks, those which the perpetrators were out the door, intended to imminently attack their targets, were successful. The percentage of attempted attacks that were unsuccessful, bombs failed to detonate or which defused, was varied considerably over time, particularly as terrorism in the country has declined. It peaked in 2011 when 44% of attempted attacks were unsuccessful, and was at its lowest in 1990 and 2012 when all attempted attacks were successful. Now, what I do know, it's hard to prove, but what I do know is that the FBI often gets in league with these folks to sponsor these attacks. If you weren't aware, folks, the original World Trade Center bombing in the early 90s, the bomb that was placed in the basement was set up by the FBI. And they recruited a man to recruit some other people to help build a bomb. And the guy kind of left the project because he was like, he thought he was helping out the FBI get extremists. And he realized that they weren't wanting to build a bomb, but the FBI were trying to convince them to do so. This is called entrapment. Now, it might not be legally entrapment as far as the way the law works today, but that's exactly what it is. Come here, kid. I'm going to help you cause a crime. This isn't the same thing as a prostitution sting where someone is willfully seeking out a prostitute, right? Like they used to do back in the day. And the prostitute was actually a cop, or inside the hotel room, the cops had a sting set up. It's not the same thing because the person sought it out on their own. This is the FBI going out to recruit terrorists to then foil their plot and put them in jail. That's what happened with the Whitmer 5. That, in part, is what happened on January 6th. Now, we don't know the full details of that, but we know that that's part of it, as well as that Antifa members did infiltrate the Capitol building and posed as MAGA folk. We know that. It's just a fact. Now, you can deny that fact. We can add that, maybe, if it wasn't on there, to the list of cultural husbandry that I read off in the earlier stream. Thane says, why Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico had a libertarian governor some years ago, if I'm not mistaken, who fixed a lot of the social welfare problems. But what Puerto Rico essentially has done is it has created a social welfare state. It's created a socialist society. Don't get me wrong, guys. We live in a socialist society now. Like, if you're fooling yourselves if you think that we live in some sort of laissez-faire, free market, private enterprise system. It's not how it works at all. It's highly centralized. It's highly controlled. It's highly regulated, and most of the people that are in the big corporations are involved with the government. They're in bed with each other. It's very much how the Weimar Republic worked. I know everyone loves to talk about how, or sorry, not the Weimar Republic worked, but Nazi Germany after the Weimar Republic. I know everyone loves to say, because they never read a book in their life or any first principles, not first principles, any primary sources. I know lots of people love to say that the Nazis were capitalists, but they simply were not. They were all about socialism. They just did it in a different manner than other socialists. And for the corporations in Germany at the time, they either had to have somebody very highly liked by the party or a party member at the head of the corporation. And the industries themselves were technically private, but they could be stripped away at any moment. You could be stripped of your private property at any moment. There was redistribution of wealth. There was subsidies of agriculture. And most people aren't aware that the Nazis were actually spinning themselves to death. It's one of the reasons why Hitler probably went to war, because war could have potentially, although it's generally economically disastrous, but it could have potentially helped accelerate the financial growth of Nazi Germany. What they were experiencing when you get into this was the boom bust cycle that we experience. We do certain monetary policies, like, that bring down artificially the interest rates for loans and stuff like that, and then it creates a boom, and then eventually with that boom comes a bubble. It's a false artificial wealth that's created, and it's created through a form of inflation. A lot of these things happened during Hitler's reign, and the commies basically very wisely changed the framing on this and decided to say, well, the Nazis were capitalists. And that has stuck since. And this is why you'll hear this to this day. You have to remember, guys, when we went into World War II, the United States was a socialist nation, without a doubt. You can debate me, bro. It's a freaking reality. We were doing things that were completely and utterly unconstitutional. We were privatizing the public sector. I got that reversed. This is going to be one of those days, folks. we were making the public sector, we were taking the private sector and making it public through subsidies and regulation. We implemented a high tax rate that, of course, started before then under Wilson, and Wilson did a lot of horrible things, but to my mind, all other things could have been stripped away. FDR's the one who solidified the government that we're in today. And that government was socialistic and fascistic. Still is. And we have ebbs and flows of how it goes, but basically we've been in a period since then of building up to being more and more totalitarian. So then you had the fascist in Italy and in Germany and wherever else. You could call the empire of Japan fascist as well, technically, but again, I'm not going to get so much into that. But then you had the Russians. These were the major political powers. The English, it's hard to say, but they were dealing with Fabian socialism, and a lot of that was implemented after the war for their belief in the need of their recovery. Either way, it was basically three socialist power fighting against each other, and the socialist won. It's the bottom line. They weren't really competing ideologies, folks. And we've had this false dichotomy of the East versus the West, this capitalism versus communism, ever since then. It's part of that Hegelian dialectic. Yeah, thing. We have a sort of form of fascism. Ron Paul, I think, stated it best. It's a soft form of fascism, because what we do is we overregulate the markets. We have a centralized bank. These are all, by the way, keys to communism as well. These are the tenets, the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. So we have that. We have subsidized and regulated agriculture. Of course, we have socialized healthcare. We have socialized pension plans, Social Security, high tax rates. I mean, guys, you're not really free in the United States. Like, I might own my home and a mortgage. Technically, the bank still owns it, right? But even if I paid it off and I have the deed, it doesn't matter. Because as soon as I don't pay my property taxes, I don't own my home anymore. Like, the government will just come and take it. All right. So, nothing over on entropy. I'm going to refresh this just in case. All right, looks like nothing's there. Nothing's there. All right, real quick, let's read this last little statement here. I'm going to get into what START is, the founder. We're going to look a little bit into that. I know, I got a lot today, guys. I got a lot of topics I want to talk about. I wanted to stream forever today. Didn't work out. I'll probably still stream till about 6, though. And again, guys, if you are so inclined to donate, please do so. Go over to Entropy. It's real easy. But more importantly, like, share, subscribe, get this out, help the channel grow. The other channel, the Justify the Memes, is up to 300 subs right now, so that's awesome. This research is a part of a larger effort to develop a comprehensive database on terrorism and extremist violence in the U.S. that integrates data from Global Terrorist Database and the American Terrorism Study, profiles perpetrators of terrorism in the U.S., and U.S. Extremist Crime Database, led by the National Consortium of Study for Terrorism and the Response to Terrorism, START, that is this organization, the study of terrorism and the response to terrorism. The research team is creating a resource that will allow operational and academic end users to conduct unprecedented analysis and incorporate incident, perpetrator, and geospatial information. So this is for academics. And this is what Homeland Security looks toward, folks. Okay, this was released November 2014. I think I said 2017. So this was the earliest data that I was able to find. Now, I did find a few other things that may be of interest. So here from the Cambridge University Press, the future study of terrorism. This was May 2016. It's just a little abstract here. You have to pay for this to get the contents, of course, but it's kind of an interesting little thing here that is noted. This article reflects on the central problems to be faced over the next 50 years of the academic study of terrorism. It discusses a series of problems that are sometimes raised regarding definitions, the division between critical terrorism studies, I like that wording, critical terrorism studies, wondering what that might be related to, and orthodox terrorism studies, and the supposed stagnation in contemporary terrorism research. So there's a stagnation in contemporary research. Interesting. Wonder why that is. And argues that these present rather limited difficulties in reality. It then identifies a greater problem in the form of five-fold fragmentation of the current field before offering suggested means of addressing the practice these latter more profound difficulties. So it has some references here, but it doesn't have the full paper because it's behind a paywall. But just from reading the abstract, I would assume that it's saying that, well, not everyone is on board with the current classifications of terrorism. That seems to be the case here. Let's look at this, a case for critical terrorism studies. Let's see what this has to say real quick. So, a case for critical terrorism studies. That terrorism research is mired by epistemological, methodological, and political normative problems is well established. What is usually overlooked is that beyond the difficulties inherent in terrorism research, these problems are exacerbated by two further factors: the predominance of what Cox called a problem-solving approach and the dispersed nature of much of the more rigorous, critical, and conceptual, innovative research on terrorism and connate fields that, for ideological, theoretical, or practical reasons, are reluctant to engage with terrorism studies. A critical turn is needed to reverse both these trends, but it must be inclusive and seek to be policy relevant. So, gobbledygook, but I would assume that this is going down the woke route. Just some little things I just found interesting. Let's look at who Mr. Gary Lafree is of START. So it says a Department of Homeland Security Emeritus Center of Excellence led by the University of Maryland. My home state. Yes, yes, yes. The People's Republic of Maryland. So, Dr. Gary Lafree was the founding director of START at the University of Maryland and is currently the chair of the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. Now, often when you study these things, because they're part of the humanities, they're an offshoot of the humanities, you're going to find that they're highly, highly left-leaning. There's a reason for that. It's called indoctrination. It's not because of the actual science. It's not because of the actual data. Because when people who are left-leaning in the humanities start to look into the actual science and data, 90% of the time, they find that their beliefs are wrong. I can't remember the gentleman's name off the top of my head, but there is an academic professor, black man, who looked into the police shooting thing and the police interaction thing, and he's been studying it for a while. I've covered him before. I just can't think of his name off the top of my head. And he found out that his preconceived notions were just utterly wrong, but he was willing to challenge them. I don't know that Dr. Lafree is willing to challenge his, as his statements on Antifa are interesting. It says he received his PhD in sociology from Indiana University in 1979. Lafree is a fellow of the American Society of Criminology and served as president of the ASC from 2005 to 2006. He has also served in the executive committee of the National Academy of Sciences, Crime, Law, and Justice Committee, and the NAS Division of Behavioral and Economic Sciences and Education. He was named a Distinguished Scholar Teacher at the University of Maryland in 2012. Much of Lafree's research is related to the understanding criminal violence, and he is the senior member of the team that created and now maintains the Global Terrorism Database. So let's go here to violent groups and movements. Radical beliefs and behaviors. Let's see what these bring up. Yeah, nothing pertinent. Stuff to go through, I guess, that, yeah. divergent dimensions of radicalization risk, migration and violent extremism, and Shaba. Okay. Tracking cartels, exploiting open sources. Yeah, okay. Counterterrorism, net assessment, data structure. Global terrorism database. Let's go here to radical beliefs and behavior. Risk and rehabilitation, supporting the work of probation officers. Yeah, this is all crime and not so much terrorism. What's interesting, ideologies and motivations of terrorist organizations. What's interesting is this guy's a criminologist, supposedly, apparently, but he's not really assessing the criminal behavior of Antifa or BLM. So let's see here. Counterterrorism net assessment data structure. START will conduct a 3-part desk study accumulating in the development of enhanced data collection frameworks for counterterrorism effectiveness. Part 1 will examine the state of empirical research, blah, 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 blah. Part 2 will consider ways in which START terrorism data can be leveraged to measure counterterrorism effectively. That's important. I get that this is how these things work, but he's actually saying that we want to look at how we can leverage these things. I don't know if that's a good way to frame it. Data is data. You use it or you don't use it. You don't want to necessarily leverage it. I don't like that language there. Leveraging, to me, connotes manipulation, I would say. Finally, START will use the information from the aforementioned efforts to develop an enhanced data collection framework, which will eventually enable the collection of data on blue, that is counterterrorism, actions and effectiveness, as well as additional data on green, relevant contextual data, and red, data on terrorist behavior. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot here to really read unless we're going to spend hours on it. I have, like I said, other things to get to. I just brought these up because I wanted to see what they had to say. Global Terrorism Database is the world's most comprehensive open source terrorism database. It includes information on more than 190,000 terrorist attacks that have occurred worldwide. Okay. So, isn't that what I was just on? Oh, this is the terrorism research and analysis. That's what that is. Okay. Let's see if I can get this. Let's see if it's comprehensible. I don't get access. Do I have to put in my email and password? Oh, my mouse. Either way, we're gonna bookmark this because we'll come back to it. Whyte Supreme Pizzas. Nothing. Didn't work. Another time. I'm not going to delay the stream for trying to figure this out. Ideologies and motivations of terrorist organizations. Another little article here with the abstract. Project will involve an effort led by Gary Ackerman, University of Maryland, and Asif Moghadam, International Institute for Counterterrorism, to systematically catalog ideological principles and characteristics of terrorist organizations. This effort will move the nature of the data available on terrorist ideologies beyond the impress labels and widespread use today in order to facilitate both qualitative and statistical analysis. Okay. We're going to come back to Le Free here, guys. So this is just a little random thing I found from 2012. Remember the DHS report about veterans being recruited to right-wing terrorist groups, which was leaked and led newly appointed Homeland Security Janet Napolitano to initially defend the report, but later having to apologize and withdraw the report after she was thrown under the bus by her own party and severely criticized by Republicans. Now, maybe you all don't remember this, but I do. I can tell you that this talking point, because that's all that it is, comes up over and over again. Recall that they were talking about, removing firearms potentially from all these veterans that might have PTSD because they're a threat. What they're doing, obviously, if you're not aware, is saying, hey, you folks, guys like me, who were trained in military tactics and may even have some actual experience in their implementation, you're a dangerous threat to our government. Now that we've used you up, after you've been injured, you have PTSD, you watched your buddies die, whatever else it's been, after we used you up, we thank you for your service and the enslavement of other nations, and you are now a threat to this nation. That's what this is about, and they do it over and over again. Happens every couple of years you hear about this. So it says April 2009. The Washington Times released a story on April 14, 2009 that said the Department of Homeland Security is warning law enforcement officials about a rise in right-wing extremist activities. Sound any different? No, I just showed you the data about what activities actually went. And this is, right, this is from that era. This is from that time. They've been pushing this for 10 years now. A decade. It's yet to come to fruition. It says the economic recession, the election of America's first black president, and the return of a few disgruntled war veterans could swell the ranks of white power militias. I don't know where white power militias exist. There was a thing in the 90s where skinheads and stuff were kind of popular, right? I think I talked about this with Jeremy and Delaney over on the Unjustified the Memes. They just disappeared. They went away. Right? We had American History X, and then it was all gone. The 9-page report, right-wing ring... My speech is not the best today, folks. Right-wing extremists, current economic and political climate fueling resurgence and radicalization and recruitment, was categorized as unclassified for official use only, but a number of news sources had posted it on their websites. The report also said that Homeland Security officers of intelligence and analysis defines right-wing extremism in the United States as including not just racist or hate groups, but also groups that reject federal authority in favor of state or local authority. Welcome to the club, guys. Welcome to the club. Now, the last video I made, it's not a normal video that I make, was kind of railing against Carlin Borisenko, and I tried to not be polemic in that. But I know at certain times I was like, "You're being stupid. You're being dumb. You don't know what you're talking about." And this is why, because Carlin has not conflated these things, but she doesn't understand that there is a difference in these things, right? And in her mind, any sort of, "Oh, look, I have pride in my European heritage," as the No White Guilt movements, talks about. Again, I'm not really involved with that or in that, but I'm not against it. If Jason doesn't seem to have any sort of bitterness or hate in his heart toward anyone, he just seems to want to allow people who are of the Western descent to keep their culture and live their lives. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that's supremacy. I don't know, though. According to the feds, if you're all about local government and you're not about them, you're an extremist. And Joe Biden just said, that he would come and nuke you. You needed F-15s and nuclear weapons. News to me, because I'm pretty sure we failed Vietnam pretty well. Not that we should have been involved in the first place. We could have went into North Korea, but we didn't. We've been over in Afghanistan for 20 years, but apparently you need nuclear bombs to fight the U.S. military. I don't know. Joshua Ham, hey buddy, what's going on? Says, federalism is terrorism. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just glad my stream is running now. I don't know why it crapped on me earlier. It really annoys me when it does that. I have no recourse for it. This was like, it's a nice sunny day out. Weather's good. It's not humid. Little breeze. So, I don't know. Maybe the tech overlords throttled me. It says the report also said that Homeland Security Office of Intelligence and Analysis defines right-wing extremism of the United States as including not just racist and hate groups, but also groups that reject federal authorities in favor of the state or local authority. Profile groups could include groups and individuals that are dedicated to a single issue, such as opposition to abortion or immigration. Sound familiar, guys? Again, this is a report from 2009. In fact, I'll try and look it up. I have a lot of stuff prepared, but, part of the idea of going on the stream was to, be able to go down little rabbit holes, keep it live, keep it real. For me to do this for a while, I have some videos to play. We're going to watch. I have some other topics to get into, which we'll get into. Especially about China and the threat of China. That's coming up soon. But I want to get through this. The response from critics was immediate. House Majority Leader John Bonner called the report offensive and unacceptable. Yet, who is doing that now? Now, there are a few in the Republican Party that are now basically trying to quell this whole idea of this Whyte Supreme Pizza insurrection on January 6th, right? But the bottom line is that the AG believes this, or is pushing this, or wants America to believe it. And if the AG said it, most Americans, I'd say 50% of them, are going to go along with it. Obviously, you have a lot of apolitical people, a lot of people that don't want to participate in the system, that are burned out, whatever. But if they hear something authoritative, Garland is authoritative, according to them, then they're going to believe it. And I have these conversations with people all the time, not recently, of course, but all the time. If I go to the bar, I have convos with people, and most people I talk with are a little bit more left-leaning, and, I can talk with them, though. We can actually have a conversation. But you'll be, oh, no, all those people want this and that. And I'm like, I don't think so. You know me. I don't want that. I don't know anybody that wants that. Or they're really good at secretly hiding it from me. I don't know. It says it's offensive and unacceptable and demanded an explanation for why she has abandoned using the term terrorist to describe those such as Al-Qaeda. You remember that? For a long, long time, Obama never did that for Al-Qaeda, right? Who are plotting overseas to kill innocent Americans, while her own department is using the same term to describe American citizens who disagree with the direction Washington Democrats are taking our nation. Bonner also said that the agency should apologize to veterans. David Rabine, I guess that's how you say his name, Rabine, the national commander of the American Legion, sent a letter of protest to the Homeland Security concerning the suggestion that veterans were likely to commit acts of terrorism. Well, Timothy McVeigh did, so they all must be guilty, right? Same logic why I know all you vegans out there are Nazis, because Hitler was a vegan, or at least a vegetarian. Right? It doesn't hold true. It's stupid. But people, they love appeals to authority. There's a reason why it's a logical fallacy. It's because it's an emotional appeal. It's not an argument. Well, this statement from the White House said, therefore it is. Okay. How many statements from the White House from old Dr. Fauci came out? Hey, Kiefer, thank you for showing up. It's okay if you got a bounce, bud. I'll be on here forever. Don't start World War III without me. I'm hopefully going to be, nurturing folks while that happens, and definitely have no intentions of being involved in a conflict unless it's in the capacity of someone who is helping those who are seeking refuge or those who are injured. But, that's the good old Christian in me talking, because I don't know what I would do if someone attacked my family. I know my capabilities, I'll put it that way, and I don't know how I'd act in a moment of raw emotion. He says, I think it is important for us, of all of us, to remember that Americans are not the enemy, the terrorists are. Conservative journalist Michelle Malkin wrote an article April 14th, 2009, calling the report a hit job on conservatives. Yeah, this is just normal stuff. One of the most embarrassingly shoddy pieces of propaganda ever read out of the DHS. I couldn't believe it was real. But this is exactly what's going on today. Judge Napolitano said he issued an apology to veterans in an on-air interview, saying, to the extent veterans read it as an accusation, an apology is owed. But he lost his marbles when Trump got into. So I really like Judge Napolitano, but yep. He got that TDS, man. This was an assessment, not an accusation. It was limited to extremists, those who seek to commit violence within the United States. And all this was meant to do was to give law enforcement that we call situational awareness. Okay, but having worked in law enforcement, the situational awareness that you give is retarded. When I have to sit through briefings about gang activities of juggalos and sovereign citizens, you're doing it wrong, folks. You're doing it wrong. Of course, I sat through that under the Obama administration. That probably came down from top. Sovereign citizens are not organized. They basically believe in a bunch of nonsense. Some of the stuff they believe is true, but they basically play semantical word games that aren't reality. And I mean, I'm not against people who want to be in the sovereign citizen thing, whatever. I consider myself a free man, but for different reasons. But juggalos are a bunch of like hippie slash. They're modern hippies. They're not really hippies. What are those folks? What would we call them? They're the freaks and geeks, I guess. I don't know. They're the people that wore the Jinkos back in the day when I was in high school. They probably still do. And they're an alternative class of folks who like to go to ICP concerts and hang out in the woods and have free love and do a bunch of drugs. I don't think you need to worry about them as a gang. But yet, I got briefings about them. I got briefings about MS-13 in our area because at Greenbrier State Park in Maryland, the Hispanics hang out there. And many of them were former MS-13 members because they moved away. And you can't necessarily get out of the gang. It's like, come on. Stuff is just ridiculous. All right. Fast forward to July 2011 from Think Progressive, July 27th, 2011. Ben Armbuster writes in an article headline, after right-wing pressure, DHS now has just one person dealing with domestic terrorism. The greatest threat of large-scale attacks come from individuals and small groups of extremists who subscribe to radical Islamic or far-right ideologies, said Gary LaFree. Now, how is that possible? In 2011, from Mr. Gary LaFree, how is that possible, my friends, when I presented to you this data? Where in 13 years, from 2000 to 2013, the number of right-wing extremist attacks was like 10. Let's add in those 5, and racially motivated attacks was like 5. We can add in, and look, I don't think the Ku Klux Klan is any sort of right-wing extremist group either. The closest thing to that maybe today is Richard Spencer, and he's obviously all for centralized control of government. He thinks your rights come from the government. If you get into what the real modern Nazis believe, folks, the real Nazis today, if you get into what they believe, as far as the ones that are very much fans of Hitler, they like the centralized authoritarian government. They like the system we have. They just want to racially segregate it, which the left is doing anyways through CRT. So they're going to get their wish. Why do you think Spencer turned around and endorsed Biden? That wasn't a troll. It's because he thought that Trump was going to implement those kind of policies that Biden is implementing and that Obama was implementing. Obama maybe not as much because he had some resistance within the Congress with the Republican majority. But so he said that is the majority of them, yet we have 64 unaffiliated, meaning we don't know necessarily their affiliation or motivations. They were attacks. It doesn't get into it. It says 9 attacks were conducted by both ELF and AFL. But right here, he's got a bunch of others, and that was of the perpetrators of responsible for attacks is unknown, and 72 attacks, 9 were conducted by them. So there you go. We have 72 unknown perpetrators, unaffiliated individuals. Then we have 113 years. We have 100 in just 2 groups that are, sibling groups, essentially. Earth Liberation Front and Animal Liberation Front. Another 8 from the Coalition to Save the Preserves. That's also left wing. 4 from Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda and the Arabian Peninsula, 1. And Tariq Taliban, Pakistan, 1. And this guy throws out all the left-wing data and says, you know what? It's the radical Islamists and the far-right extremists. They're the real problem. Now, I would agree with the Islamist, although it's not that big of a deal in the U.S., generally speaking, these days. But other Western nations are having problems with them. But how do you get that from that data? Director of the National Consortium of the Study of Terrorism and Response to Terrorism, or START, Gary Ackerman, research director at START, said, nationally, law enforcement has been focused since the attack of the World Trade Center and Pentagon in 2001 on the threat of Islamic terrorism. Even as the threat from domestic anti-government groups has been growing, some people believe that we have kept our eyes off the ball when it comes to domestic right-wing extremists, he said. Well, where are the attacks? It's now been confirmed that the Oak Creek Temple was mass murder. Wade Michael Page was indeed a veteran white supremacist neo-Nazi, that's not right-wing, a leader of White Power music band. Okay, so that was the one I didn't know about, called End Apathy. I wish the Obama folks would pull out the DHS report and send it to Bonner and other Repubs and demand an apology. Okay, but regardless of that, that's not a right-wing position. Racial segregation was ended in this country by Republicans. The Civil Rights Act was passed by Republicans. Slavery was ended by Republicans. And before some idiot tells me about the Southern strategy, it was made up and does not exist. And people say, well, no, but Lee Atwater said, no, he didn't. He alluded to an idea. He didn't say anything. And what they say is, well, he offered jobs instead of, suppress the black folks. Yeah, those are two different things, is it not? Jobs versus, laws discriminating against people. Not really in the same ballpark. It was also the unions, folks, the unions that the left likes to prop up that kept black folk from having good jobs in many, many places. You might not be aware, but the blacks had a flight from the South, and they went to places like Harlem and Detroit. How did that end up for them? I don't think the black people in the South, the majority of them, who live in regular neighborhoods or whatever, deal with the issues that people that move to the northern cities, Chicago's another one, of course, who clustered themselves there to then be enslaved by their masters on the Democratic plantation. I don't think that most of the people that live here in the South that are black folk that live everyday lives are living in the kind of crap poverty that people live in inner cities. It has nothing to do with your skin tone. It has everything to do with where you grew up and your values. And more, and probably most importantly, your parents' values and if you have an intact family. That's huge. Even the Brookings Institute conceded that one. So guys, I could bring up more stuff. Let's do one last thing real quick. Let's do a Googling search. Is Antifa a terrorist group? So from May 31st, 2020, an argument against classifying Antifa as a terrorist group. That's what this guy's doing here. He's the one who's in charge of it. This is where the federal government is getting its information. What he says goes. What Starts says is what the Department of Homeland Security and the AG and the Justice Department and everyone else, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, whatever alphabet organization you want to talk about, this is where they get it from. Doesn't matter what the data says, it matters what they're told. Starting in 2016, a number of protests and physical confrontations aimed at individuals and groups associated with right-wing politics in the United States have been attributed to an ill-defended entity called Antifa. What? Groups associated with right-wing politics. I don't think old ladies walking down the street or people in their cars being assaulted are associated with any politics. Seems to me like they're just people going about their business, and Antifa interceded politics into the situation. And they're nothing but a bunch of thugs. They are literally the brown shirts of the modern day. It's quite ironic. United States have been attributed to an ill-defined entity called Antifa, short for anti-fascist, who have a history that goes back 100 years. Let's do this before we even read this. Antifa history. A brief history of anti-fascism. Well, this is from the Smithsonian, so I know this is going to be totally ridiculous. The anti-fascists were always just fascist. Communists are just fascist, guys. I'm not going to mince words with it. Like, you all end up in the same place. Your arguments against that are just like people that you're making an argument a process, right? And so you're saying that, well, by process we do it differently, and therefore, look, in Italy it was nationalistic, and in Germany it was racist, and Franco's Spain, I'm not sure it was, because Franco's Spain was an interesting mix of things, but I think it was just a matter of trying to maintain their cultural hegemony and bringing their people into wealth. Now, the same thing happened in Franco's Spain, though, as well, in that they, I talked about in Germany, is that they created kind of a bubble system like we have here. And so Spain got kind of wealthy, and then it had a hard recession. People say Spain doesn't have socialism, but yet it nationalized a bunch of industries. It created a union, just like Nazi Germany did. It just was part of the government. So, the left will go, well, they got rid of the unions. And it's like, no, they just made the union part of the government. They just nationalized the union. Let's see what, I don't even know. I don't even want to read what Time has to say. We'll just go with the wiki article. Antifa is a left-wing, anti-fascist, anti-racist political movement in the United States. It was highly decentralized and comprises an array of autonomous groups that aim to achieve their objectives through the use of both nonviolent and violent direct action rather than through policy reform. That, my friends, is the definition of a terrorist organization. Much of their activism is nonviolent. I don't know about that. They also engage in protest tactics seeking to combat fascists and racists such as neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other far-right extremists. You've yet to do it because they don't exist. I mean, they exist, guys. I'm not, dense, right? They're like a nothing burger, though. They have no institutional power. I remember, I don't know, when the early 2010s-ish teens in Sharpsburg, Maryland, there was going to be a KKK rally. It was a big old deal. Like 5 KKK members showed up, and it was a big, ridiculous thing with the sheriff's department having security there. 200 other protesters showed up or something, or people, observers, for these 5 people. It was just stupid. The closest thing you're going to find to racial supremacism on white folks' ends that are actually active and do things are in gangs, prison gangs, biker gangs, that kind of stuff. That's it. They don't really exist in a majority polite society. Individuals involved in the movement tend to hold anti-authoritarian, anti-capitalist, anti-state views. I don't know about that because they're quite authoritarian. If you're using violence, folks, you're an authoritarian. And I don't mean in self-defense. Self-defense is another thing. But if you're using violence to get your point across, you're an authoritarian. These, again, first principles. First principles, first, always. Now, what's interesting is that basic sentence there says that they're decentralized and autonomous groups. And just as I read to you earlier from TRAC, Terrorism Research Analysis Consortium, the Earth Liberation Front is a collective of autonomous individuals or covert cells. But I guess I have to go and see what Mr. Lafree's arguments are. A high-profile example took place in Charlottesville, Virginia. Okay. That became high-profile because someone died and the person had the wrong political beliefs who was the perpetrator of the death. What about all of the burning down of everything that happened last year? Don't get me wrong. This was in May that he tweeted that, but we'll go look at his tweet here soon. Or his Twitter, I should say. During 2 days of conflict and violence, anti-right-wing protesters clashed with right-wing supporters. During the second day of the confrontation, a right-wing supporter drove a car into a crowd of protesters. Yeah, but the protesters was a mixed bag of people. This whole thing is ridiculous. It's all framing. No one cares about the truth. While many Antifa supporters see it as a defense against right-wing extremists, some on the right view supporters instead as terrorists. I tackled these issues in an essay by applying the guidelines of the Global Terrorism Database to determine whether the actions of Antifa supporters during the Charlottesville incident constitute terrorism. Oh, so it's just the Charlottesville incident, not all the other incidents. Full citation. So, 15 May 2018. Starting 2016, a number of protesters and physical confrontations aimed at individuals and groups associated with right-wing politics in the United States has been attributed to an ill-defined entity called Antifa. They're not ill-defined. They have a long history. They go all the way back, as the first article I brought up, to at least Franco's Spain and Nazi Germany. Right here, we have anti-fascism, Yugoslavian partisan fighter, shouted death to fascism, freedom to the people, seconds before his execution. Yeah, and then you got fascism through the commies. So good job. Good job with that. Post-World War II, anti-fascism. Germany, Antifa. Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland. This is the expert, though, guys. The expert. Sorry, switched to the wrong article. An ill-defined group since 2016. They've been bashing in things since long before that. Hey, I know. Let's do this. Let's go right here. So this is a list of terrorist attacks, Antifa attacks, who are Antifa and are they a threat? From the Daily Caller, a list of attacks against conservatives is mind-blowing. Now, this article might not be prior to the one I have there. Ah, it is. So, a wave of liberal rage. Yeah. has marked the last 11 months since the rise and subsequent election of President Donald Trump. Blah, 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 blah. In creating the list, the DCNF reviewed numerous articles detailing attacks and violent threats against conservatives and Trump supporters. While there are examples of anonymous threats, the DCNF chose to include only those that credible. Some instances of violence between rival protesters were not included as it was difficult to ascertain who initiated the event. Okay. So this is number of events. This is over time from June, November. It was high. It was peaked. And then here's the actual list. August 2016, anti-Trump protester attack, pushed, spit on, verbally harassed. Okay. Trump was already in office, though. This was going on before that. What happened to Ben Shapiro and having to, they closed down. They wouldn't provide security for him at Berkeley. And then it cost them $600,000 to secure Berkeley. I'm pretty sure that was before Trump. What about the Trump 2015 rally that he was holding? I think it was still in 2015. It was in Chicago, and there were Antifa members there. What about that? Holly, let me know she's still here. We'll appreciate that, Holly. Appreciate everyone still being here. We're going to keep going through this, guys. It's going to be a long stream, as long as I can do, as long as my wife can stand it. But there are other things I want to talk about, so I'm going to probably play a video here soon. Segue into some other stuff. Maybe get some food in my belly so I can keep going for you. So here we have Trump supporter in New Jersey was attacked with a crowbar. Someone in California was beat up. GOP office in North Carolina was firebombed. Oh, yeah. Nazi Republicans get out of our painted with Nazi Republicans get out or else. That, my friends, is a terrorist attack. Mind you, I'm not LaFree. I'm not some, desk jockey. I actually spent a good amount of time learning counterterrorism and what terrorist acts were. It was part of my profession as a Marine. And then also I had to have some clue about it while I worked in law enforcement. No, I worked on the correctional side of things. So a little bit different. I had issue ever wanting to become a police officer. Just could not see myself enforcing laws that I found unjust. But, we did, like I said, transports and other things where I worked outside of the jail as well. And of course, we had gang training and information on this all the time. You had to be aware of it. You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. So in November 2016, this is where that big spike was. A high school student was attacked after she wrote she supported Trump on social media. The perpetrator ripped her glasses off and punched her in the face. So that was violence against someone for their political position. That's called terrorism. That's what it is. There's no mincing words over it. There's no, let me intellectualize this until 15 different rabbit holes that lead you to nowhere that are absolutely meaningless. Because I don't want to label these people terrorists because they support my ideology. See, that's the thing that's happening here, right? The president of Cornell University, college Republicans, was assaulted the night after Trump won. Student protesting Trump punched and kicked. A Maryland high school student was wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Student was arrested in Florida after punched a classmate. Group of black men in Chicago attacked a white man wearing a Rage Against Trump. While raging against Trump. Unlike Juicy Smollett, who had to set up a fake hoax hate attempt, right? Since you guys didn't see, since you came back later, I had this up earlier. from cultural husbandry. These are all the truths of the world right now. Epstein committed suicide. McAfee committed suicide. Biden won the election. COVID came from a wet market. Conservatives are all terrorists. Ivermectin doesn't work. HCQ doesn't work. Biden doesn't have dementia. The jab isn't making anyone ill. Fauci was consistent. Mask work, COVID passports, and so forth. And there was a reference to, right there. Juicy Smollett was attacked. Maryland high school student punched a student who was demonstrating in support of Trump and then kicked him repeatedly while he was on the ground. Y'all need to learn to fight, by the way. I don't advocate going out to protest. That's what the left does. I think it's stupid. Nothing against any of you all who do it. It's not like I haven't done it in the past when I was younger. I think it's stupid. I don't think it does anything. And I don't like mob mentalities, and I think it encourages that. But most of you are aware now that you just can't. You just can't. Because you will be attacked and you will be blamed the perpetrator of the attack. Like the members of the Proud Boys in New York. You support Trump. You hate Mexicans. A California high school student yelled at a Trump supporter before viciously beating the girl. It's funny because my Mexican friends, actually real Mexicans, like Trump. Really interesting. An anti-bullying ambassador was arrested for shoving a 74-year-old man to the ground in a fight outside Trump Tower where people upset over this had won, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it continues, right? Huge list of this stuff. Here's another one. Examples of violence and Antifa terrorism. All right, so counting stars. Violent fanatics who label as fascist everyone who disagree with them and their ideology. Antifa, examples of violence and terrorism that many media have been hiding. It's from 2020. And these are just videos of examples. Now, again, you all know this. I don't know if it likes my dark mode. You all know all these things. I don't need to go through every single article about it. You know how to Google search or DuckDuckGo or whatever else. Let's see what the FBI has to say about domestic terrorism. Select the image of suspects to display more information. Interesting. Not much there. Are Antifa terrorists? From Newsweek. Feds have reportedly classified them as terrorists. Actually, they did. Let's just go to this nonsense here. So this guy's completely unaware of Antifa's activities prior to 2017, apparently. During the 2 days of conflict, violence, anti-right-wing protesters clashed with the right-wing supporters, blah, 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 blah. It says, I conclude that while the events share many characteristics of terrorist attacks, they do not include all the elements of terrorism required by the GTD. I also question whether Antifa can be considered to constitute a group at this point in time. My essay highlights how complicated it is to distinguish terrorism from other forms of illegal violence. It actually isn't. If it's politically motivated, it's terrorism. And if it's not politically motivated, it's not terrorism. Further reading, interesting. Marchers head from Charlottesville to Washington to protest white supremacists, making them lionized as idols, right? That they are the good ones. They are the good folks that do this. Let's see, a guide to Charlottesville aftermath, New York Times. Like none of these are his sources, right? Like they're not biased. The Atlantic, politics and policy. The Atlantic is horrible. Brookings Institute, right? I told you this guy's a lefty, 100%. Domestic terrorism and sovereign citizens movement. Sovereign citizens haven't carried out any domestic terrorism, but we'll look at that article just real quick. All the way back from 2010. This is probably when I was getting briefed on it. Absolutely insane. And I was aware of the sovereign citizens long before I was getting briefed on it. And I just, the whole time, I just was like laughing at this lecture that we were getting about this and how serious the guy was taking it. Domestic terrorism. America is attacking Americans because of U.S.-based extremist ideologies comes in many forms in the post 9/11 world. To help educate the public, we previously outlined 2 separate domestic terrorist threats: eco-terrorist, animal rights extremist, and lone offenders. That's generally the real problem. And now it's Antifa and BLM. BLM, by the way, folks, isn't considered the problem because they're not really seen as the ones doing the violence. It's seen as Antifa doing the violence, but BLM also stands for the things that the cathedral, if you want to use the NRX words, terminology, that they stand for. They are, right? BLM is what the cultural institutions of the Western world have been cultivating for 60 years. Today, we look at a third threat, the sovereign citizen extremist movement. Sovereign citizens are anti-government extremists who believe that even though they physically reside in this country, they are separate or sovereign from the United States. Well, I 100% believe that. I'm not a sovereign citizen, but I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And I can tell you right now, you have no authority for me, buddy. I can leave this nation anytime I want, or this world. And now you can do stuff because you got the guns and you have the supposed authority that you claim. But that's just ridiculous. And the framing of this as well is that the government is above the people, which of course is the clown world that we now live in. It says, as a result, they believe they don't have to answer any government authority, including courts, taxing entities, motor vehicle departments, and law enforcement. I can tell you right now that licensing for driving is not, it's not constitutional. I'll put it that way. It wasn't a thing until the progressive era. This causes all kinds of problems and crimes. For example, many sovereign citizens don't pay their taxes. They hold illegal courts that issue warrants for judges and police officers. So don't listen to them. Like they don't listen to you. I don't understand what the threat is here, right? They clog up the court systems with frivolous lawsuits and liens against public officials to harass them. So you mean they do what the government does to its average everyday citizen? I got a HOA that put a lien on my house. No joke, because I paid a bill that was in dispute. Well, I paid off a bill that was in dispute with them, and then they told me I was done, and then they had a legal fee that I didn't know I was supposed to pay that was the exact same amount to the dollar. It was chicanery, folks. Absolute chicanery. And when I went through that and I talked to their new lawyer and whatever else, we got it sorted out. But that money had to be paid off, paid down. And, of course, I was indigent for a while as I was injured. Big whole long thing. But basically, if I wanted to sell my house, I couldn't unless I got that lien paid off, which means I owe the HOA money first. How is that any different? That's went through the local county courts. Well, the difference is who is perceived to have power. That's how it's different. I don't have any power within my HOA. And you as a citizen don't have any power under our federal government. And this stuff, what this is talking about, I can tell you right now, 13 years I spent in the sheriff's department. The majority of the people that work in law enforcement, folks, will just take this on its face value and believe it because it came from the authority. The reality is that law enforcement is not filled with gentlemen like me. It's often filled with folks that want power. Now, there are a lot of folks that want to do good as well, and they do. They absolutely do. But, those cops often get ran out as the corruption gets promoted to the top, and they get worn out by the rigmarole and the nonsense. In the end, I would say all these problems come back to the scaling issue that I often reference. So let's keep going. That's just the beginning. Not every action taken in the name of the sovereign citizen ideology is a crime. But the list of illegal actions committed by these groups, cells, and individuals is extensive. In addition to the above, sovereign citizens commit murder and physical assault. Oh my goodness! Well, let me tell you about that 13% of the population. No, just joking. Seriously though, so what? Yeah, individuals commit crimes. How can you lump all these people into the same ideology, into the same group? See, this is a fundamental problem when we scale up this big with a state that is unaccountable and out of control. Anything that is other is an enemy, and it's all lumped together because they are collective, because that's what the public is. And what has happened is that half of the nation's voices or more are no longer being heard. They threaten judges, law enforcement professionals, and government professionals, impersonate police officers and diplomats. Show me the cases. Using fake currencies, passports, Sovereign citizens also often confused with extremists from militia movements. But again, I showed you that data. We don't have anything where they did much. Now here it says, in Sacramento, 2 sovereign citizens were convicted of running a fraudulent insurance scheme. Oh, so they were con men. That's not terrorism. In Kansas City, 3 were convicted of taking part of a conspiracy using phony diplomatic credentials. So they're con men. This isn't terrorism. In Las Vegas, 4 affiliated with the sovereign citizen movement were arrested by the Nevada Joint Terrorism Task Force on federal money laundering, tax evasion, and weapons charges. So what terrorism did they participate in? Why is this domestic terrorism? This isn't terrorism, folks. These are just crimes. Just playing stupid games here. All right. I knew I'd talk about this forever. Hopefully you guys are still enjoying it. I got 6 eyes over on Entropy right now, but only a few comments. Guys, I'm going to keep streaming. We're going to segue into the commies. And we're going to look at some stuff about the commies and how they're coming up into the world today, and that is through the old CCP in West Taiwan. And the one thing I really want to cover here is this video. So we're gonna get this up.
War against the U.S. in just a matter of months.
Didn't expect it to play immediately, but hey. This is a really good interview. I caught the other day. It is worth your time. We're going to watch it. And we're going to go through it, kind of dissect it to some degree. And I think I'm going to get up there, take a break. I've been streaming straight for about 2 hours. Not to mention the 20 minutes I did before, and I've been sitting here, and the fact that I was over on Christian Watson's stream for, I don't know, 5 minutes or whatever it was. So again, hopefully I will get him on the show in the near future. All right. I just want to close some things out, not to overtax my system here, guys. So, from Man in America, is China preparing to invade the United States? There's a lot of stuff said in this. A lot of stuff I don't agree with. Holy cow, Matt! Thank you, buddy. Big donation. Big donation from Matt over on the Entropy. Grats again. Have some baby money. Much appreciated, bud. Yeah, I mean, if you guys can donate, like $5-10 would be great. Obviously, you don't have to. Like, share, subscribe. Show me out later. Go watch later. One of the things, unfortunately, about doing things the way I am is that I don't have any way to, like, for you guys to donate later on if you want, like a PayPal. I could maybe set one up, but I do have a Subscribe Star, though. And if you guys want to go over there, that's just an easy way to make a monthly donation. I do have tiers set up. I have one guy who's been loyal with that. He told me he didn't need me to do anything for him. But if you go over there, we can talk. I will set up private conversations if you want with certain tiers or direct material. It's one of those things. If you're going to support me in this channel and support my family, then I feel like I should do something special for you in return. This is all volunteer. I'm doing this regardless. I'm not trying to get rich from YouTube or anything either. I just figure, it's nice to make a couple extra bucks considering I spend a lot of time. Excuse me. I spend a lot of time here. So once again, Matt, thank you so much for that. That was very, very generous of you. I did not expect any donations that large. Anyways, let's get back to this video. And I'm going to go take a little breather, guys, just for a minute.
War against the U.S. in just a matter of months, according to my guest today. But are they acting out of strength or desperation? With mounting problems at home, food shortages, economic turmoil, population collapse, and political unrest, not to mention the millions of armed patriots here in the U.S., is China really a threat, or is it falling apart at the seams? All this and more on today's show. Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Hullhouse. Joining me today, an interview I'm so excited for, is J.R. Nyquist, a geopolitical expert, journalist, and author who's been sounding the alarm about China and communism for decades. Welcome, Jeff. Thank you. Apologize to everyone for the little technical glitches and the late start. It somehow seems that whenever we have the most important things to do, that there's some sort of interference. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So let's go ahead. Before we start, why don't you just jump in, give me a little bit of background. You've been exposing communism, especially its threat against America, for quite some time. How did that come to be for you? How did you get into this?
Well, I was in graduate school 33 years ago, and I discovered that there were communists. They were real. They were active. They wanted me to join them. I did not believe in Marxism, so I couldn't. And I got really interested in what they were doing. And of course, I started reading defector literature, started trying to figure out how this thing worked. And I had a kind of epiphany. The defector literature, people who've come from their system to ours, is kind of prophetic. When you read them, like Anatoly Golitsyn, for example, in 1984, he said the Soviet Union would fake its collapse, the Warsaw Pact would go away, the Berlin Wall would go down, the Communist Party would give up power in the Soviet Union, but he said it would be controlled liberalization. It would be fake. And if the West believed it, you were then on a path to what he called the West weakening its guard, and then the Russia and China would be getting together, building up their forces for what he called the period of one clenched fist, when they would come in to go in and finish off the United States.
Wow. Which now, when you say one clenched fist, so we've got, I think a lot of the focus has been on China. I think a lot of the, especially the more mainstream media has created a boogeyman out of Russia. But who do you see as the real combined threat? Is it really the communist bloc around the country that's uniting with, Venezuela, Cuba, et cetera? Who's really together in this against us?
There's an important game. You have to understand the bag of tricks strategy. Like chess players, you have different openings, you have different strategies. You've got the hyper modern style, and the modern style, you've got traditional openings. Well, there's something called divide and conquer going on here. And I will point out, you just mentioned this, you're going to have people like saying Trump was a Russian puppet. You got people like Patrick Buchanan saying that Putin's a good guy, Putin's a Christian, he wears a cross and stuff. That's all phony baloney. Putin is not a Christian. That is nonsense. I've talked to people from St. Petersburg who know him. He's not a Christian. He's a communist. The collapse of the Soviet Union was not as it was advertised. And what is happening now is the Russians and Chinese are playing a scissor strategy, a divide and conquer strategy in which they play each side of the divide. For example, about the India-Pakistan war. China came in and took the side of Pakistan. Soviet Union came in and took the side of India. So they're using that conflict to control each of the people in that conflict. Now, how it works here is you've got the Russians are working the right side of the street, convincing people on the right that the Russians are their friend. And meanwhile, the Chinese, these ladies that were running Black Lives Matter were Marxist trained, Chinese Marxist trained. You've got Antifa with its connections to China. So you've got the left working with Jen Biden saying, oh, the Chinese are good people. We need to work with them. So you have this left, right, blue state, red states, Russia, China. They've divided and they're playing both sides of the street. The great thing is that in this division, you can then, let's say if they cause a civil war here, which was that the KGB Colonel Igor Panarin was talking about in 1998, that the U.S. could divide up and then there could be foreign intervention. Well, if you look at this foreign intervention thing, you can have people who are killing people on the blue state side and killing people on the red state side, but they kill the ones that aren't agents under control of Russia and or China. And Russia and China, that's how this blades of the scissors close. There's two blades in a scissors, and you bring the blades together against another thing.
It's
so
the
the blades
art of
aren't
war,
really fighting each other.
The pincer formation.
Right. It's a strategy. The Russians and Chinese as strategists, they use this strategy, and it's a super one. It's the biggest one we've ever seen. And what they rely on is that we don't think there's a communist bloc. We don't think it's about communism. We don't think that Russia and China are united. We think they're enemies. And the thing is you can talk to I can show documentary evidence and defective testimony till I'm blue in the face. People are stuck in these narratives that are guiding them towards this division, dividing the country and damaging the country. But these two countries over here, look, who released the pandemic on us? It came from China. They timed it for Chinese New Year. Look at that. They had to incubate it in the city of Wuhan, the hub of China, right till you get to Chinese New Year's, the greatest travel day in the world, where people from the Chinese diaspora come into Wuhan for the New Year, and then they all go out to Australia, North America, Europe, and spread that pandemic. That was not an accident. That was not an accidental leak. Yeah.
Because one of my frustrations with the mainstream media, and even a lot of the more, less mainstream conservative media, is that they're really stuck on the discussion of, was this something from nature or did it come from a lab? Where if you look at in 2015, the book published by the PLA about a bioweapon, and even if you look at, which this was very eye-opening to me, and I've got here in front of me, the speech given by General Chi Haoqian in 2005 talking about a biological attack. So they've been talking about this for a long time. And what is a little bit frustrating is that why is the discussion not, this is a biological attack. Why are they doing this? Who's behind it? And what is the next step? What is this the precursor for?
So before we go down this rabbit hole, I am not saying that it is such a thing from China directly, but it's an interesting thought to consider. Now, for me, I tend to place these things in more of a globalist scale, and that we are essentially in a one world government at the moment, even though it's not super formal yet. And with that one world government at the moment, we are having competing interests trying to see who's going to have control. Now, the United States has been propping up China for the last 40 years, and in doing so, China is economically ahead of us. It's just the bottom line, and they certainly will be for sure by 2030. They're about to celebrate here by 2049 their 100th anniversary, right? So they are doing this in the expectation that they will be the world leaders. And so after we watch this, or some of this, I don't know if we'll get to watch the whole thing, we'll talk about the Chinese social credit score and what some of these world organizations think about such a thing. Now, I have been saying also on this note that Wuhan, being a city of several million people, I think 11 million, if not mistaken, 11, 12 million, a lot of folks, that this would have been international quite quickly. There was a caller on Matt Christensen's call-in show a couple weeks back, 3 weeks ago, I believe now, who talked about this, was studying the virus, studying how it could have came out, how they make these gain-of-function viruses and the type of proteins that they use to do so, and etc. And how this thing seemed to have gotten weaker as it stabilized because man-made viruses have a propensity to do so. All that, to my mind, is quite interesting. But, Occam's razor labs seem most plausible. We could say that perhaps it was accidental, but it seemed to be timed quite well in order to get a certain orange man out of office as well. So who knows? Who knows? And this is kind of the thread in which they go down.
Right. Look, the good news is that the weapon didn't work the way they wanted. You
It
notice
was made in China.
Right. It was made in China. That's a very good. The communists always have these missteps. Today, for example, is June 22nd. Very important day to remember because Stalin had orchestrated World War II beautifully. He had made his pact with Hitler in August of 1939 so Hitler could invade Poland with him. Then he let Hitler go ahead and invade Poland. He said, "Oh, I'm running a little late." And then Russia and France declared war on Germany for invading Poland. Whereas if Soviet Union had gone in with it, they couldn't have declared war. So Hitler thought, "Oh, the Allies can't declare war on me. They'd have to declare war on Soviet Russia too." But he went in and he's like, "Well, where are the Russian troops? They're supposed to be invading." And so he ends up. So here's Stalin laughing because his enemies, the West, Great Britain and France, are at war with Germany, and he's just sitting back watching. But how did his plan blow up? Is Hitler realized he'd been double dealt. He realized by the way they were behaving, the diplomats, the Russian diplomats. So he turned the Wehrmacht around on the 22nd of June. He surprise attacked Stalin, right? Wiped out a whole bunch of Soviet armies. Russians were defecting over to his side because they hated Stalin so much. So they had this big debacle, right? Hitler almost won the war right then because the Russians, the communists, make these kind of mistakes. And so with the release of this virus, you have a similar thing. They have this great thing. It creates micro blood clotting in the lung. It cuts off oxygen for the red blood cells. It's like a combination of, this SARS-CoV bat virus with HIV and malaria.
Yeah, attacks the immune system.
Yeah, it does all kinds of things. But the problem was, as this Nobel.
Now, I've talked about this in the past. I'm not sure that any of that is true. It seems to be particularly hard for folks who already have extensive damage to organs. That seems to be the case. Now, I haven't gone through every ounce of little data that I could find about this because, I have a life and other stuff to do. But what we do know for sure is that it affects the heart tremendously. Now, if you weren't aware, there is some newer evidence emerging that some of these jabs may do the same thing. It's in a small percentage of people, but it's not necessarily helpful for the thing that they were trying to stop. And if you want to understand the issue about why you can't talk about certain medications and medications being used as a treatment, it's because of the vaccines, folks. Because if there are other treatments, then you can't create a vaccine. So in order to prop up big pharma instead of the generic potential treatments, and again, I'm not saying they're cures, I'm just saying they're ways that doctors have used to treat. It doesn't mean they're always successful either. But those treatments are quite cheap. And of course, that doesn't help with the Great Reset now, does it? Because in the end, that's what all this is really about. Remember, Event 201 was immediately before all of this happened. Event 201 being the big World Economic Forum experiment, tabletop role-playing game, that is, about a coronavirus being released onto the world.
The laureate said last year, chimera viruses that are made in labs, they rapidly mutate towards the common cold, right? So they become even more transmissible, but less harmful. So you have all these deaths forward loaded at the beginning. You had young people dying, dentists, doctors, nurses dying in northern Italy and Wuhan. And then all of a sudden it just wasn't killing young people anymore because it was losing its oomph. But they had to keep the panic going because they
had to keep the same narrative. The mechanism of that narrative had to keep going, which is why you have in places like Australia, you have complete lockdowns over 15 cases in an entire state.
Because it's also an economic attack. It's an attempt to besiege our economic system and wear it down and bankrupt us and cause social anarchy. That's why in the middle of the pandemic, you had these communist mobs running through our streets, tearing down statues of Teddy Roosevelt and George Washington and Ulysses S. Grant, the one in San Francisco, for example, tearing down the statues. Black Lives Matter running through, looting stores, burning what they burnt and looted, $1-2 billion worth of damage. And they were saying defund the police. Well, these are all communist slogans. This is all very obviously communist.
It's textbook,
right? And so you got the fifth column activated. And at the same time, the biological attack, you notice, once it started taking off in the United States, the Chinese started getting nervous. They started mobilizing. And then you saw armored columns moving towards the coast opposite Taiwan. You had these increase in air sorties. You had naval mobilizations. You had the same thing in Russia. You had the Russian government was fired even before they knew, at the beginning of January last year, which was really a dead giveaway. It's like, what's going on? They just fired their whole government. Well, they were putting them underground. They were having two governments, one set of officials in bunkers, another one out front because American policy is you do a bio attack on us, we nuke you.
We nuke you.
And I had intelligence from people in other communist countries that those communist countries had been instructed by Russia and China to rotate a large percentage of their leadership in and out of bunkers, nuclear war bunkers, in case the U.S. just came unglued and said, all right, you did this to us, we're hitting you back. Because they started a war. They committed an act of war on the U.S.
So an interesting note of this. Again, I'm not saying that this is what is actually occurring, but it's a good perspective. It's an interesting perspective. It's something to take note of. But recall just the other week that the CCP were saying, or at least members of the CCP were saying, that if America investigates Wuhan, they will strike the U.S. with nukes. That's a pretty insane statement to make. Why would they be that aggressive? Why would they make such a statement without basically having anything to hide, like that they were participating in bioweapons. Now, my mind doesn't think that China's working autonomously. I don't see it. There's far too many people that are traveling back and forth that are learning how to speak Chinese in order to set up businesses there and whatever else. Um, and they're very well liked, seemingly, by the World Health Organization, the IMF, the UN, whatever else. In fact, we know that the UN has had some corrupt members who were taking money from China. Um, we know that academia here likes China because they line their pockets so they can sell out our intellectual property rights. So if you have this government that's doing this thing, and we have basically documentation on the United States side saying that we were funding it, you could see why it might be a little problematic to keep a lid on things, that they were making a bioweapon and the reasons why, because somewhere in the documentation, there might be actual reasons why they were doing this. Now, again, I'm not saying that they were making a bioweapon, because I don't have any proof of that I'm aware of. It's only a speculation. So, the reality is, though, is that they were working on this. They might have seen that, hey, this might be a viable thing that gets this going on. And again, I just find it very coincidental, very interesting that the WHO gave so much cover to China, that the World Economic Forum, right before all this really started, was like, hey, we're going to talk about the exact same scenario starting and what we'd have to do. And then there's a book all of a sudden ready to be published, at least by, June is when the Great Reset came out, COVID-19 and the Great Reset. So that was just a few months after lockdowns. So it's all highly suspicious. It's very sus, if you would. Guys, speaking of which, I know I haven't brought the daughter up and out yet, but I might go get her here in a minute if y'all want to see babies.
U.S. with a biological weapon.
Which also makes sense. And as we talked about before, there's certain topics surrounding November 3rd that we can't go too into detail with, but it makes sense why they couldn't have Trump in office. Because if anything, they're accusing him of starting wars, whereas he was just standing up and not just bowing down, which is the opposite of what you see happening now under Biden, especially if you look at what happened in G7 with Putin, et cetera.
It's very interesting to mention this. Yeah, Trump had backed them into a corner in the trade talks, and they were taking damage. Now, this Hong Kong businessman, who's one of my sources, he said that the original plan, the Chinese plan, was to start the war in 2035. They believed they were going to pass us militarily in 2027. But because of the damage that Trump had done to their economy, and because they were ahead in their military building program, they were actually saw themselves in a better position, and they'd really infiltrated our society. Um, they were in a position where they thought, we have to do something now. So they decided to go ahead with this biological attack now rather than on their original timetable. And what this businessman said is that this within months they're going to war with us because that is built in, that's baked into this cake. Once they unleash the bioweapon, it's a matter of months before it eventually evolves, because either we wake up and realize we're in a war with them,
Uh-oh.
or they have to, before
Whoa.
we rearm, before we get ready, they have to.
All right, guys. So real quick, let me go to something I know that has a bigger camera. We have sound now. Wife said there was no sound. I'm sitting here talking. All right. I don't know why there's no sound on that. How about now? How about now? We have sound now? Because it should be good now. It's reading on OBS. Yeah. Well, I know, honey, I switched, but I wanted this camera's got a bigger view. So again, I was saying, you guys didn't hear, but as I picked her up, she just pooped. So as I was saying, I put this as a donation stream to bring her on, and I wanted to celebrate the anniversary of the channel, which was Friday, and I was just unable to because of course, having a baby. And we got home at 1 a.m. Thursday morning. I was up to like 5. You know, you got adrenaline and all that. I had to go get it. Like, I think I drank like 3 beers that night just to kind of calm down and relax. And then, of course, we had family coming over like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. My wife's family came in out of town. So just a lot of stuff that kept me from streaming. And, you know I said I was going to take this time to write the book, which I am, but I haven't really had a chance to do that yet either. It's been very busy. Also taking care of my wife, and she's recovering, but the birth went really, really, really well. We left at 5:30 a.m. in the morning. That was Wednesday morning, and or no, we got there at 5:30 a.m. I'm sorry. So I didn't get any sleep, but she sort of slept between contractions, but I can't sleep in strange places. I think I passed out for 10 minutes, basically. And then we helped her out, did whatever, got some food for us. Long day, and then finally, I don't know, 5 in the evening, 6 in the evening, we got in a birthing pool for a little bit, and at some point in there, my wife, during a contraction, said she felt like she had to push, and we started doing all that. She started pushing, and about 45 minutes later, we got this little thing. We got this little thing. Look at her. Look at her. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is what the donations are all about. Hey, little one. And I'm going to get her back to my wife, though, since I'm trying to do this, and she's got a poopy diaper. Which I tend to change more often than not, but not today. Not today. So let's get back here to the video.
Proceed to the next steps. So this is why this is extremely dangerous. And of course, their plan has partly fallen apart because the virus didn't work exactly the way they wanted. We don't also know the follow-up to the virus. Is there another biological attack disguised as a variant of this that they're going to try to say, oh, it's just a mutation, but it's just a new weapon that they've deployed? We don't know how that will play out. There's also the questions about the vaccine. We've got a lot of people being injured and reporting, and there's a lot of controversy. So we don't know what the vectors are. Biological war can be very complicated, and especially when you've got these massive institutes in Russia and China dedicated to studying these things that they've been working on this for decades. Chi Chen, the former defense minister of China 20 years ago, gave a secret speech that the plan was a surprise biological attack on the United States that would kill 100 to 200 million Americans and would pave the way for them. Because what China really wants, and I know this from the defector Stanislav Lunev, In 1991-92 area, China and Russia negotiated a future war plan against the United States, where Russia would take Alaska and parts of Canada, and China would get the lower 48. And the Chinese really negotiated for that lower 48. And in Chi Hao Chen's secret speech, he talks about this. We gave away territory to the north to the Russians, so we could secure this land, these lower 48 states, to build a second China
To
inside
colonize
the.
America,
Yes,
basically.
because look, you got 1.4 billion people in China, it's the size of the United States, but China is very arid. It's a very dry country. Asia is much drier than North America, and so they despite the floods they're having, right, the last year and now this year again. But what they've really got the problem with is that they've polluted their environment, they've destroyed the water table, they can only feed about half their people with their domestic food imports. And there's this thing also happening called the grand solar minimum, where the sun's electromagnetic field is collapsed. And this is the indication that we're going into a Maunder minimum where global temperatures are going to cool. The growing season is going to shorten. All this food that's being grown by the European Union and Russia and Canada that are feeding all these, like the Arab countries that also are arid and don't have enough arable land. So you're looking at massive shortages of food. China won't be able to pick up the food for the 700 million of their people on the world market. They need land.
So, if you're understanding this, right, everything that the environmentalists tell you about the earth warming and how catastrophic it's going to be is absolutely wrong. Now, I don't know about the grand solar minimum happening, but what I do know is that if it does happen, the earth will cool and it will not be very good. It won't be the joy if the earth warms. If the earth warms, we'll be able to plant more crops and we'll have better irrigation and other things. That's how it works. If it cools, not so much so. So that's very important. We also know that China is buying up resources all over the world. They've been doing it for a long time. They are very much involved in Africa. So, and then a third part of this is that he talked about the pollution and the waterways gone and whatever else. This was part of Mao's thing. He thought, he was like, I'll direct the rivers and I'll do whatever else. This is always leftism. See, the environmentalism they want to do is like Malthusian death cult nonsense. It's not about actually making things better for people. It's basically removing people from the natural places of the world. And they really do in a lot of their writings and things, they talk about it like that human beings are a virus or cancer upon the earth. I always refer back to the movie Kingsman, where Samuel L. Jackson's character plays the megalomaniac who explains this. And he's like, see, global warming is the earth just has a fever. And what we need to do is just get rid of the people. It's just too many people. And none of that's true, by the way. The distribution of resources and all has more to do with technology than it ever has to do with the number of people that we have. But on top of that, it has to do with the leadership and who hoards it and whatever else. I think the other day, I don't really get on Twitter rants or whatever. I might make a comment here and there, but I'm not really on Twitter. But the other day I saw someone tweet something ridiculous out about, oh, you free marketeers and your solutions. How's that going to work when you have your Somalian warlord? And the first right there, I'm like, okay, so you don't understand anything. You don't understand first principles. A Somalian warlord is a government. Okay? He's using force to maintain his power and oppose his force upon the people that his will be implemented. That's called a government, right? And then he's got people underneath him that help him enforce that. That's a bunch of people. It's a group of people together that are basically dividing up the resources. They're taking from others and redistributing them to their liking. That's what we do now. That's not free markets in any way, shape, or form. A free market would be the free exchange of things, no, without warlords. And you say, well, but Bill, a warlord always has to come about. Not necessarily. Not if people are willing to fight against one or able to fight against one. But they don't understand the basics of these things. I watched a really interesting video from Tick History the other day where he was making a rebuttal to this just very obnoxious channel that I like had like almost no subs, which no big deal. I mean, everyone's got to start off somewhere, but it was almost like, why is he making a rebuttal to this? But the arguments that they make against his arguments were just absurd. He plainly talks about capitalism, using that terminology because it's the Marxist terminology, being the individual ownership of property, and that socialism is the public ownership of property. Now, that is correct. On first principles, he is correct. And the people that rebutted him were saying, oh, he's using semantics, blah, blah, blah. Everybody knows that the system we're in today is capitalism. Everybody knows it's the individual ownership of property. And he's like, exactly. So we're not in a capitalist system because we don't individually own property. Now, we have some individual ownership of property, obviously. That's why most people will say it's a mixed economy. I heard the other day someone tell me, oh, it's late stage capitalism. I'm like, what are you talking about? Late stage capitalism is having a centralized bank, having subsidized agriculture, having corporate entities, which, by the way, are government entities unto themselves, like my HOA is, because they're public. They're not individually controlled. They're controlled by groups. First principles, folks. It's not hard. It's not hard. Academics like to make things hard. And don't get me wrong, there are some things that are more difficult to understand in the abstract. But the reality is when you break them down to their simple black and white principles, it's pretty easy. So anyways, I don't even know why I got started on that. Environmentalism is a false idol, Matt says. I 100% agree. The environmentalists are always the people in the cities, and they're always the worst polluters. I actually have a thing from that from Andy No the other day. What was that? Where is it at? Oh, I think I put it under here, under degeneracy. Because, you know, gay pride and all the woke people, all the Gnostics, who in their hearts are good people. This is what they all care about in the environment. This is what they did to their city. And it's funny that I'm watching this because that very fountain right there in New York City, I watched Fleckus doing a video on earlier today, and it was not in any way, shape, or form this polluted. And then all that blows everywhere, goes, you know, every single time, though. Every single time. We saw this with the Me Too movement and whatever else. The left does not practice what they preach. They're Gnostics. They have the proper beliefs, therefore they are saved. That's how their thinking goes.
And they need to move people out of China. And they need to prevent a collapse of their country, both economically and in terms of food, which would cause a revolution. Every time in history that during the modern minimum, there were peasant uprisings in China, horrible bloodshed, cannibalism, mass starvation. They know what's coming.
Food was always central to that.
Absolutely central to it. And so they know they're facing this. And this is, so when you ask at the beginning of the show whether this is desperation or strength, they got tremendous strength right now, but they also have tremendous desperation. Because last year with the massive flooding, there were whole provinces in China that lost their rice growing. All 3 seasons, I understand, were lost. They had late spring freezes, which is part of this grand solar minimum, and it's just beginning. 10 years from now, it's going to be pronounced. Nobody's going to talk about global warming 10 years from now. It's going to be a dead issue. That's just complete nonsense. And so they know food growing, and we got 7.7 billion people. We're not going to be able to feed 3 or 4 billion of those people when this thing really settles in 10 to 15 years. And so they've got to solve their problem. And this negotiation they made with the Russians in 1991, getting the lower 48, this becomes more imperative. They can't wait to 2035. They have to move early for like these multiple reasons I've stated, because of Trump, because of the modern minimum, the grand solar minimum. So therefore they pushed the button on this, and they moved the ball forward, and they need to get, you saw the thing about Kyle Bass discovering this, the Chinese PLA general who's a billionaire in Texas bought 200 square miles to build a wind farm, and he's building a 10,000-foot runway,
Yeah. It's
which
not
can
suspicious
accommodate.
at all.
Yeah, no, it's not suspicious. You can't land Chinese troop transports there, and then the reports of Russians down on the border in Mexico working with the cartels, rumors coming out of the former Soviet Union that Spetsnaz has worked out a deal to move soldiers into the United States, commandos across the Mexican border, the cartel to smuggle them. I mean, the stuff that's coming out now, it's just one thing after another, and of
Do you
course,
think that,
yeah,
quick question for you, because something that you had talked about in your interview with Mike Adams, and also you've written about, is specifically in an article you posted on your blog, actually, The Invasion America, talking specifically about the southern border and the work with the Cubans and the cartels, and obviously with China and Russia. Do you think that that's one of the major reasons why Trump was pushing so hard to build the border wall, and why he kept talking about securing our southern borders? Because he saw the impending plan to use the southern border to mobilize Chinese and Russian troops into America.
Yeah, of course, the southern border is to infiltrate these small commando units in advance of a war, and to infiltrate WMDs. I mean, what Colonel Stanislav Lunev emphasizes that Russia, for example, was maintaining secret stockpiles of munitions. And one of the tasks he had was, and he testified before Congress on this, was that to set up places where they could bring nuclear weapons into the United States and maintain them in secret stockpiles to unleash them internally. And then what Lunev told me is the plan was to pawn this off as if it was Arab terrorists doing it, like we were being attacked by ISIS, or um, uh, you know, Osama bin Laden. Well, he's dead, but one of these
Al-Qaeda,
terrorist
etc. Yeah.
organizations.
The Islamic boogeyman that they always
The
use
Islamic, yeah,
to shift
exactly.
blame away from, talk about the fact that those are mostly KGB funded terrorists anyway.
Right. Well, you had Alexander Litvinenko who drank the polonium-laden tea and died of radioactive poisoning. He was a defector from the KGB, successor organization, the FSB. And what he came when he defected, and he came out with this later, closer to when they killed him. This is probably why they killed him. Is he was saying, look, I was responsible for Ayman al-Zawahiri's security, and when he was trained in Russia in '96. So, when you look at Al Qaeda, Osama bin Laden's number 2 guy, Ayman al-Zawahiri, was trained in Russia, and Litvinenko said that other Al Qaeda leaders were trained in Russia, and that the whole attack on the World Trade Center was a Russian operation. And Litvinenko, it's like 15 months later, he drinks the polonium tea and dies. And we all saw the horrific pictures of how he died of radiation poisoning. He said Putin did this to me. And they did. The Scotland Yard, they traced the polonium radioactivity leaked on the plane, the Lufthansa, that he took all the way from Germany back to Moscow. Lugovoy was the name of the guy that brought the polonium. He was one of Putin's bodyguards, an FSB guy. So it's like this plot thickens massively. They have these different diversionary operations, like the War on Terror. This is described by Viktor Suvorov. That's the pen name of Vladimir Rezina, a GRU defector who wrote a very famous book called Spetsnaz. And he talks about infiltrating the border with Spetsnaz.
The book Spetsnaz is highly recommended, by the way. Folks, you can understand some of the tactics that they did, and it's a pretty easy read. You'll see how brutal the training was, the difference between citizens who don't have rights versus citizens that do. Not that the military in the U.S. has always been so touchy-feely, but it certainly is not anything like the Eastern Bloc style training. And people were somewhat expendable. if you would. I don't know if you guys caught the last thing I was saying, because I think my mic wasn't working there either, but it is 100% OBS doing weird stuff, which makes me think I should switch to StreamYards. I just don't want to pay the money. So, but that's also why donations are helpful, because that helps me so I can do this, and you guys can help support the show in that manner. But in any case, I'm going to play a few more minutes of this. We're going to talk about Chinese social credit score and I don't know, some other stuff. I wanted to talk about, what's the other thing? I want to talk about migration patterns, some alternative history or anthropology, if you would. Just some interesting perspectives and things that have been on my mind for the last, I don't know, nearly 2 weeks. I mean, again, I did stream on the Justify the Memes, but I haven't streamed here by myself. So, anyways, let's get back to this, watch a few more minutes, and we'll keep going.
Deployments before a war, but he talks about Great Terror, in which the West is attacked by a terrorist organization that doesn't seem to have any ties with Moscow, and that it diverts all the security and all of the military assets of the West away from Russia to this other
Middle
enemy.
East, we see.
Right? Yeah. It's a diversionary thing. And this is preliminary to the buildup to the war. So this is not only the Sino-Soviet split deception, the collapse of the Soviet Union deception, we're not communists anymore, and Putin starts wearing a cross, it's just phony baloney. He doesn't believe it for a second. And then you've got the stuff going on in China where we're building them up, and all of a sudden every year they're building a navy the size of the French Navy, adding to their fleet, every year. So now we find ourselves in this terrible pickle where we're outnumbered. They're lined up against us, and we're hit with a pandemic. And by the way, if you read Suvorov's book, 1987, he wrote it, Spetsnaz, he says that before the war, there will be a rapidly spreading viral pandemic. It's right there in the book.
Wow.
Defector literature, whether it's Golitsyn or it's Suvorov or it's my friend Colonel Stanislav Lunev, is prophetic. And you say, what, do they have a crystal ball? No, they knew military plans.
Right. And they plan these things out for years in advance. So that really has to be understood. Now, I don't think that the Russians are currently working hard to undermine America or this and that. They would like to be in power again, but they have an economy they need to get control of, which they're slowly working to do. I mean, the standard of living in Russia, as far as I understand, has grown tremendously. But their GDPs are still far lower than the majority of the states and most of Western Europe, most of the NATO allies. So there were, though, a lot of active measures, and there are folks who would love to go back. So one of the Russian martial arts guys that was propped up for a while in the West here was a guy named, I think, Konstantin Komarov, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I've never trained with the man, never met him, nothing. But I've trained with plenty of people that have trained with this guy. And he's a former KGB. And I was told by someone I believe that they were at a table having dinner once with a bunch of them. And a lot of the folks were, just sitting there having a jovial time. And someone posited the question, what would happen? What would you do? What would happen if all of a sudden the Soviet Union came back tomorrow or whatever, like in a moment, you just found out? And supposedly, again, this is hearsay, but supposedly he's like, I would kill every one of you right now at this table. I mean, that's a guy that's devoted. He's like, I'm just living for the day, waiting for the day for the old Soviet Union to return. And I would kill all you capitalist scumbags in a second. So keep in mind, there are probably people in Russia who still think that way. Earlier on, after the Soviet Union had fell. There were some surveys done in the early 90s. Most of the people in Russia wanted it back. This is because they had to fall on even harder economic times than they already were on. And then other folks said that they were, there have been some surveys where they said that they prefer their enslavement because freedom is hard. And I did have, she's been making her rounds, but Yao Ming Park has been going around here recently, making her rounds and talking about essentially the crazy stuff that's been going on in the colleges and how it's in some ways worse than North Korea. Now, obviously, it's not, but it's going in that direction. And this is one of the things that she says, she talks about in her book and in other interviews, is that when she found out that she had choices and things, it was hard because she was so used to being a slave. Now think about this, because we know that, let's say, folks who are abused their entire lives, folks who are put down and told that they're stupid and that are basically never allowed to rise to their potential, we know that they become codependent on the folks that do such a thing to them. It's a sad, sad tragedy, and it is the archetype of the devouring mother, that you infantilize your child so much that they cannot live without you, even in adulthood. This is the archetype that the federal government has been taking on in the United States and all of the West, if you would, for the last 100 years. It is utterly destructive to the entirety of all of society, except for those who are in the upper elite class or are the party members. They're the only ones that get advantage in this. So, there's, article after article on the Chinese social credit system, but thought we'd look at a few. Maybe if I get a chance, I can do the Obama riots. But, I might not cover everything because I just don't know. I don't feel like I have enough viewers or interaction going on right now, guys. And, I got a life, but I was trying to do a long stream today. Maybe the fact that I had the first stream and it crapped out on me and had to come back. Maybe that's part of this. Who knows? Whatever. But again, I was trying to celebrate the channel. And guys, I made the channel a year ago and I didn't know any of you. I didn't know a single one of you. And now some of you have my numbers. I interact with you regularly. We're part of other streams together. And it's a great thing that we can build community here. So, and hopefully keep that community in the hard times that we're about to face. So this is from Princeton.edu. The social credit system, not just another Chinese idiosyncrasy. And an abstract here. As an unparalleled ability of big data to capture and process real-time information signals a revolution in public administration. Countries around the world have begun to explore the application of the technology to government functions. At the forefront of these efforts is China, which is planning to launch a social credit system, a data-powered project to monitor, assess, and shape the behavior of all citizens and enterprises. So, just that alone, going back to, Yao Ming Park, she thought that the great leader, the dear leader, was a god and could read her mind. She thought the birds would tell on her if she whispered. She didn't know anything about choice. She didn't know any other way of life. Because of this, and because she's a, fairly attractive lady, but it probably wouldn't matter if she was or wasn't, she was used as a sex slave in China for years before she could get to South Korea. She didn't know about any of these things. This is social engineering. This is what North Korea has done. But they've done so at the expense of cutting off all modern technology from the world and starving out their people. So she was talking about how her favorite color was assigned to her. And of course, her favorite color is red because they're communists. These are things that we take for granted. But trust me, if you become a slave, you will not have forgotten. Yes, you will not have forgotten your freedom, but your children will. Your children won't have any understanding of it. And that's what's continuing to go on, right? Generation after generation after generation. Matt says a predator class. Stalhuck says, I'm here just building a layer box for the chickens. Ain't no worries, guys. I mean, it's just a thing where I planned to do this at 2. I kind of had put that off to see if my system had some issues. And then when I went live at 4, I probably should have ate before that. But it is what it is, you know. And I ran downstairs, you know, got some water and stuff and all that. And between here, grabbed the daughter, of course. But it's just one of those things. I didn't know if I could even do it. I was going to try and push to do a 4, maybe even 6-hour stream. Guys, it's not easy. It's easier if I have people with me because we can chat back and forth. They can carry it. I take my little break and get up and go pee and go do my stuff. But these guys that do these super hour long streams, you know, good on them. I'm not built that way. I can't sit here that long. So it was really going to be a matter of who showed up, you know, who, you know, how many donations people might give, that kind of stuff. And I understand, you know, hard times right now, folks. People are tight on money. So please do not put yourself in a financially precarious situation if you cannot donate. That's not in any way, shape, or form anything I want you to do. But yes, if you wanted to congratulate, that was kind of the point. Again, anniversary, had a baby, cool conspiracy stuff. I don't know. So anyways, let's keep going with this. It says, this new frontier of digital surveillance raises questions about how the United States will incorporate data technology into its own politics and economy. Why? Why is the United States considering this? It's not constitutional. We shouldn't be concerned about this at all. Then again, we're not concerned about our Constitution at all, are we? Unless the Democrats are going to use it to browbeat Republicans over the head, which is absolutely ridiculous. Matt says, yeah, the book burnings in digital form, they delete the good from the past, prevent us somewhat from bringing forward the good and discarding the bad. Yeah. Well, I like to bring up Milan Kundera's quote about the liquidation of a people from his book of laughter, because it's really good, which is why when I was on Yiz's stream the other week, I brought it up and read it directly so I didn't screw it up. It's just part of the active measures, guys. It says this article argues that the U.S. needs a comprehensive nationwide data protection framework that places limits on surveillance by both private business and the government. Well, first off, when you're dealing with large corporate entities, those aren't private businesses. Those are businesses that work with the governments and they're subsidized by the governments. When we're talking about all of these things, I can tell you right now for a fact, my mother used to work for AT&T, and she used to work with spooks on getting phone data. There was procedures and everything. I've talked to her before about it and telling her that it wasn't right. And she goes, oh, no, they don't do that. They don't just do this and this and that. But again, that's not normalcy bias, right? That naivety of believing that the government has our best wishes, our best interests in mind, right? This is why I can't keep streaming, guys, because I'll just devolve into not being able to speak. but our best interests are in mind. And sure, local government might, made of the people and for the people and by the people. I would concede that. We don't have that. Do you think that we have a government for and by the people? Like, they want to make you a debt, you already are a debt slave, but they want to make you a debt slave even more, where you have to rent everything. Build Back Better was Joe Biden's slogan and every other international leader's slogan and every local leader's slogan straight out of the World Economic Forum. But, I just deal in conspiracies here. Just a conspiracy theorist. And a Whyte Supreme Pizza, apparently, too. Anyways, this article argues that the United States needs a comprehensive nationwide data protection framework that places limits on surveillance by both private business and government without drawing its own baseline for personal data protection. The United States risks missing an already narrowing opportunity to define its balance between democracy, security, and growth. Well, this is a bit too much to go through. But, yeah, that's a pretty good point as far as I'm concerned. Let's see. This was, I think, one of the first big articles I ever shared with anybody about the social credit score, and that is from Gizmodo. No, this isn't the one. This isn't it. This is from 2020. Not what I was looking for. Or maybe it was Wired. You never know. Yes, it was Wired I was looking for. Here we go. So this was from 2019. The complicated truth about Chinese social credit system. The Chinese social credit system isn't the world's first, but when it's complete, it will be unique. The system isn't just as simple as everyone being given a score, though. Yes and no. I think Black Mirror got this right. So China's social credit system has been compared to Black Mirror. Well, there we go. Of course, something I read some years ago, and maybe it was something before even Gizmodo put this out. But this was a pretty good article. And again, we're not going to go through the whole thing, but I just want, you guys got a sense of this, but let's just review a little history about it real quick. The idea for the Chinese social credit system has been compared to Black Mirror, Big Brother, and every other dystopian future sci-fi writer can think up. The reality is more complicated and in some ways worse. I don't know, slavery is slavery to me, so. And again, back to Yao Ming, she wasn't even free in her own mind, folks. That's how nefarious and pernicious this is. It's horrid. In her own head, she was not free. And this is what happens. This is how you get a dumbed down, stupid society. The idea for social credit score came about in 2007 with projects announced by the government as an opt-in system in 2014. Oh, opt-in, eh? But there's a difference between the official government system and the private corporate versions, though the latter scoring systems that include shopping habits and friends is often conflated with the former. Well, yeah, because we have the corporate system in place here in the United States. It's called Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. It's called Instagram and whatever other big tech outlet you want. Reddit, which is a communist garbage heap. Guys, it's already here. Like, we're just looking at this and going, oh, China has an official system. Official, unofficial doesn't mean we don't have one. Brits are well accustomed to credit checks. Data brokers such as Experian trace the timely manner in which we pay our debts, given us a score that used by lenders and mortgage providers. We also have social style scores, and anyone who has shopped online with eBay has a rating on shipping times and communication. While Uber drivers and passengers both rate each other, if your score falls too far, you're out of luck. But again, that's not a government entity. Now, some of these are. This is the individual in society saying to the rest of society, hey, this is my individual experience. It's not the same thing. And in fact, most of the time when I read reviews for food or whatever, I'm very skeptical because I don't trust most people when it comes to food, because someone will tell me, oh, this place is great, and I'll go eat there. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Then again, I've made that mistake too, where I've told people a place is great and haven't been there in a long time and come there and I'm like, this is nothing like I remember it. So there's also that. But I am kind of snobby when it comes to certain things. Not that I like treat people like a snob or, whatever, but I'm just saying I'm particular about certain things, and food's one of them. And so I don't always trust people with that kind of stuff. But this is just individuals saying, hey, here are the ratings. It's different when it's corporate, although they do that too through bots and fake accounts, monkey or sock puppet accounts. Monkey accounts. I don't know why I was going to say that. Again, guys, been 3 hours by myself now. This is what happens. China's social credit system expands that idea to all aspects of life, judging citizens' behavior and trustworthiness. Caught jaywalking? Don't pay a court bill. Play your music too loud on the train. You could lose certain rights, such as booking a flight or train ticket. Well, they're not rights if you can lose them, are they? I mean, we do technically take rights away after due process, but still, they should be reinstated afterward. The idea itself is not a Chinese phenomenon, says Merky Olenberg. Research associated with the Maricotter Institute for China Studies, nor is the use and abuse of and aggregated data for analysis of behavior. But if the Chinese system does come together as envisioned, it would still be something very unique, she says. It's both unique and part of a global trend. Now, why would it be part of a global trend is what I would ask. And the response, if someone asked me to that, would be because it's human nature. Because the nature of human beings is to consolidate power for themselves and their own interest and impose their will upon other folks. Now, maybe that's not your nature. It's not really my nature either. But as a whole, in humanity, this is what we do. This is where we get governments and kings and queens and whatever else. And there is a vast majority of people who will idolize. They will make people iconoclasts. And they will decide to worship them as gods on earth. It's just the reality of who we are, folks. I'm no leftist who rejects the blank slate. Of course, we are imbued with programming. We live in a material world. We have a material substance. We have bodies which we are confined to. I can't go jump off my roof and hope to survive because I, identify as I don't know, the somebody who can jump, 20 feet down to the ground without breaking their bones. It doesn't change anything. Just because I believe it doesn't mean it happens. The secret isn't real, folks. That whole idea, if you manifest it, you'll manifest it in your life. If you just believe it hard enough. No, you have to take action. Human action. Human action is what is important. It's the only thing that we can truly go by. Ideas don't matter. They do matter, mind you, but for the illustration, ideas don't matter. What's in your heart doesn't matter. How you act is what matters. What is China's social credit system? Unveiled in 2014. Pieces of the system are already in place, and the Chinese government appeared to be targeting 2020 goal to get the rest in place, though that's less a deadline and instead marks the end of a planning period. That's what they do. They plan and plan and plan, and then they implement. That's why the active measures from the Soviets are still in place and still unfolding. And don't get me wrong, guys, from that video earlier, you should go watch the whole thing. Man in America, he's got a good channel. I'm not on board with everything he says all the time, but whatever. Got a good channel. I like it. But if you think that if Russia wouldn't ally with China because it believed that it was going to gain some sort of advantage over the West, which tries to bully it constantly, you're definitely wrong on that. And I don't think Russia's the big threat. China for sure is. They are going to be the world government here in, 10 to 20 years. It really depends. If we keep doing what we're doing with inflation and collapsing our markets and global trade deals and shipping off our sovereignty, it will probably be 2030. That'll be the actual implementation of the Great Reset. And all the stuff that Klaus Schwab wants to do with the Fourth Industrial Revolution will take place first in China. And need I not remind you that he did an hour-some-odd long interview with Xi Jinping during the World Economic Forum this past year in January. I don't believe he talked to Biden or Kamala, but, then again, Kamala would just cackle and Biden would not know where he was at, so. It says, while unofficially, private versions are operated by companies such as Ant Financial, Zima Credit, better known as Samus Credit, and for its payment firm spun out in Albania. The systems use shopping habits, among other data, to inform credit style scores on an opt-in basis. There's no single nationally coordinated system. Okay, but they're trying to get there either way. And it doesn't matter. This is how the government gets around. When we talk about surveillance today, it's how they get around things. If you weren't aware, Tucker Carlson was talking about that the NSA was spying on him. One of the things that they do, aside from using outside foreign agencies to do their spying for them, is they can use, the interwebs. And so when you send an email out to somebody, maybe it gets directed around the world to another country. Maybe it goes through a server in Canada before it gets to its destination here in the United States. And now that was a foreign communication. There's lots of little loopholes, folks. There's lots of things that they do. And just like they told you to your face that they were not spying on American citizens, and then later on, the whistleblowers came out saying that they were and provided the data, make no mistake, they're spying on them now. But Americans have a short memory. Just can't seem to remember much at all. So here's around the same year. IMF proposes tracking your web history to determine credit score. The International Monetary Fund, which is just a big international bank that is meant to prop up its own power and bring about one world government, although they hide behind the guise of trying to prop up third world nations, yet they've not done anything for a single one of them. The International Monetary Fund suggests that you should have a credit score determined on your web history. And I don't know if that's comments or whatever else. We're going to read this. We all know that there are never really safe. We all know that we are never really safe online, and that our web history is likely being tracked. I don't know. I'm using DuckDuckGo most of the time, so I use Google when I feel like using Google. But I can't find I can't find results I want with Google, so I'm going to use DuckDuckGo most of the time, aside from the tracking issue. I was looking for role-playing dice, tabletop role-playing dice the other day through Amazon. I got on Instagram later on. Sure enough, guess what was being advertised to me? But these are separate corporations and entities, folks. They don't communicate. They didn't coordinate anything to get rid of Alex Jones. That just was organic. It all happened organically in the same day. But for what reason, we may ask ourselves, a new blog post by the International Monetary Fund may provide some insight. Now, granted, this article is a little old, 2020, December 2020. It's not that old. But I'm just saying, it's not out today, put it that way. Finance and technology. 4 researchers examined the results of a working paper that explores the ever-evolving relationship between finance and technology. We study the effects of technological change on financial intermediation, distinguishing between innovations in information, data collection, and processing, and communication, relationships, and distributions. Yeah, okay, so I don't care. Researchers further look into the possibility of using your browsing. So when I go and look up quotes, or I go and look up, things on, the International Communist website, or look up things from Mein Kampf, what are they going to think? Do those things really represent what I believe? Or am I just doing research? How do they suss this out? And purchase history. So if I buy, I was talking to my wife the other day, I can't really afford it, but I was saying if I was able to afford it, maybe I could get a new sight for one of my newer rifles I've had for a while, because right now I just have irons on there. So, and I was going to lowball like $100 sight, but there was one that was decent, a little green dot that I thought I'd give a shot to, And what if I'm labeled an extremist because of that? Because I wanted a green dot. Why does he need that? Well, for lots of reasons. But you know what? I don't need to explain myself either. So there you go. Matt says, do away with the protectionism, industrial complex, and the state is enforcing, which is preventing us from being an industrious factory working nation as it scale in resources and trade rationalization. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what we were doing under Trump. Not quite. I mean, Trump could have done a ton of things economically better. I wish he would have stuck to his plans on his original. No, I didn't vote for the guy in 2016, granted, because I wasn't sure about him. But if he just stuck to what was on his platform about insurance, that would have been great, like opening up insurances across state lines. If that would have been the case, if insurance would have had to cover other areas and not just certain areas because of certain rules and this and that, then mostly are implemented by state bureaucracies. Pretty sure my wife and I would have been able to drive half an hour to the birth center instead of an hour and a half, because there's a birthing center nearby that is owned by the same people, but the insurance didn't cover it because it wasn't in Nova, or they didn't consider that area Nova. Stupid stuff like that, right? Da Huck said, I just ordered 80% Glock 19. Come at me, feds. Yeah, man, 80%. You manufacture it yourself. Can't do nothing about it. Them crazy ghost guns. Scary, scary, scary. All right, let's see here. All right, this may allow some individuals that are overlooked by financial institutions to have access to more loans, states the writer. Why? Because of your browsing history? You're going to have access to more loans? That makes no sense. Oh, because Gnostically, inside you believe the proper beliefs. You believe that, yes, you have the state is the all-powerful mighty, and that we have to protect the people of color, and that everyone has to have UBI, and that transgender people are stunning and brave, etc., etc., etc. Therefore, you should get a loan. It's utter absurdity. It's a good way to bring an entire society to the brink of collapse, which is the point, or to control them and enslave them. The researchers argue that if lenders have a better picture of a client's entire history, they may be more willing to be lenient with them. Banks tend to cushion credit terms for their long-term customers during downturns, they write. Well, right now they're not giving out credit because they're only allowing the Federal Reserve and other big organizations to buy up the homes. I'm not saying everywhere, mind you, but there is an artificial housing bubble going on, and not a lot of folks are talking about it. To put in simple terms, the proposal is that giving banks access to our most private data would develop the intimate relationship that would allow more of us to benefit from the cushioning. No, because there's no accountability. And you're talking to someone who had basically superb credit until I injured myself and couldn't work. Like for all of my life, I've never had an issue getting a loan. I mean, my last car loan, I had no interest on. My credit is that good. They just were like, interest free through Toyota. Okay, whatever. I don't see this. This makes me think about the movie It's a Wonderful Life, where why can't I think of his freaking name now? Anyways, the main character, right, bails a bunch of people out with his own money when there's a run on the bank, because it's a community bank, and the Bailey Savings and Loans was like a family community thing that the people knew each other. When you have some ominous technocratic oligarchical corporation out there, do you think that they're going to be fair to you? Think about all of the corporations right now that are doing all the woke scolding and well, they're not anymore, but they're going to keep woke scolding in one way or another, but did all the Pride Month stuff. And if I'm sitting here, now I don't care that you're gay or not personally, but it's like, I think Pride Month is ridiculous and quite degenerate and bad for our society, because basically being promoting promiscuous sexual activity is not how you develop a strong society. Like that's a good way for a warlord to come in, because that those are the things that eventually happen. It's a good way for a lot of dejected men who don't get women to then go out and do horrible, horrendous crimes because they've been disenfranchised. And it's a good way to oppress women, because the more a society becomes homosexual, the more homosexual tendencies there are, and they're more androgynous a society becomes, that is the mixture between masculine and feminine, the more women are actually oppressed. That is a culturally anthropological fact. If you prop up the gays and the transgenders as the highest in society, and we start doing everything for them, right? Then what happens is they're going to start to downgrade women, that thing you fought for all those years in your feminist movement. We're seeing that now with the fight for the transgender athletes. No one's arguing against transgender female to male athletes because they're just going to get smoked by males. It's the males who are mediocre athletes that are going over to be females that are the problem. Females can't compete against each other anymore, can they? Not fairly. And people who are saying otherwise are presenting disingenuous arguments. There is no way you're going to convince me, as someone who has a long history studying anatomy and biology, especially because a lot of that was learning how to dissect it, but also how to heal it. And let me tell you, and also how to make it stronger, mind you. Let me tell you, men and women are not the same. We're the same species. We have a lot of similarities, but we are not the same. We are sexually dimorphous for a reason, as well as the rest of the majority of the animal kingdom. And the stuff they're talking about today is just nonsense. And it's meant to, it's meant to discourage you. It's meant to make you feel like you have no hope. It's meant to make men weak because we've given all of our power over to women. And now the women are giving all their power over to the homosexuals. And it's not just, we could talk about if homosexuality is a sin or whatever else. I'm not going to go down that route. But we're talking about, I'm going to say that the degenerate homosexuals, the promiscuous, crazy homosexuals, the ones who want to flash and show their junk to children. Now, I watched Flickus Talks this morning covering Pride in New York at that fountain I showed. And the people, they were like, oh, no, I don't think this is a problem for kids. Pride's not a problem for kids. What do you mean? Do you know what happens when you sexualize children and the trauma it creates in their minds for the rest of their lives? They either become ultra promiscuous and they'll never be happy because they can't pair bond correctly, or they become ultra prudish. And often they become abusers themselves. Joshua Ham says there was one female to make who wanted to wrestle against males. Yeah, but right. I saw that case. Yep. When I was in high school, man, we had a chick, Megan. I remember her pretty well. She wrestled on the male wrestling team. She's all about weightlifting and all this other stuff. She could hang. Let her hang. But it doesn't work the other way around. I'm a little dude, not a big dude. I can handle big dudes. I mean, once big dudes start to know how to fight, it gets me into trouble. But I'm just saying, I can handle big dudes. I can definitely handle bigger women, in a fight. And I'm a little dude. I'm 150 pounds. I'm 5'6". I'm not intimidating to anybody, but I know what I'm doing. And I'm actually a lot stronger than I appear as well, but that's a whole nother thing, even though I'm not in great shape at the moment. I'm working on that 6-pack though, working on getting that back. But the point I'm trying to make here is, as my brain is struggling because I need food, is that even as a small guy, I am going to beat up most women, and there are going to be very few women that are going to be able to handle me. Now, they might be heavier than me, and therefore they have some advantage. But that's all a matter of how we're fighting too, because I fight dirty. But that's that's a whole nother thing. Mac Beggs, it won state championship. Shocking, no doubt. All right. So anyways, the IMF was calling on that. Here is another one from Market Watch. Says your browser history could decide your credit score. A new study found an alternative way of measuring credit worthiness. Really? How is this related to credit? Your credit score determines everything from whether you get a mortgage, blah, blah, blah. Your digital footprint profile can assume more than 250,000 measurements and analysis of 399 purchases made to a German-based e-commerce company. The researchers were able to determine with which they contend a higher rate of accuracy whether a customer would make payments on time. I made payments on time always. I had most of my credit always paid down early, even though I might have a rolling amount on that account for a long time. And the moment I ran into trouble and I called the banks, they did nothing for me. Absolutely nothing. And right now, I get things in the mail that they want me to pay off my debt for pennies on the dollar. Interesting how that works. Now, I don't care. I do care to some degree, but I mean, I really don't care. I found myself in that situation after 15 years of impeccable credit. They don't care. But, I don't trust them to look at my internet browser history and be like, you know what? Bill's actually a really good guy. He doesn't spend much money on a lot of stuff very often. And, he might have for a while, and we really liked making money off him. But you know what? He was reading some stuff that we don't like. He said some stuff on the interwebs We checked his browser history. He runs a YouTube channel, and it's really tiny, but he said he's not all about Pride Month, and he thinks that homosexuals and transgenders are going to bring about more problems for society and oppress women. Can't have any of that. Josh says, I'm 5'10 and 270, even though I'm not in good shape. It would be literally suicidal for any woman to try and fight me physically. Yeah. I mean, I feel you, man. I got out of shape because of my injury. I actually showed my wife the other day a picture because I've been working out. But I need to change my diet again because I've been lax on that. And I showed my wife a picture of right before I got out of shape. And she was like, I want to have that again. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't take long, though. It takes about 3 months. Probably not even that long. And probably, if I consistently for 8 weeks, I'd probably be in pretty good shape again. It's more the muscle mass because I'm not a guy who puts on a lot of muscle mass. Although it's easier for me the more I age. And I know a lot more. Know a lot more about manipulating hormones and androgen receptors and all kinds of stuff than when I was younger. Let's see. It says trustworthiness was particularly important to this particular company because its customers pay for products after receiving them. All right. Anyways, that's enough of that. Before I get out of here, guys, because I will at least do the 4-hour stream I said I was going to try and do. Let's go to one more thing. And that is the Obama riots. There's a lot of stuff I could talk about with Obama, but what we're seeing right now, folks,
last one, number.
What we're seeing right now is a continuation of the. That'll come up in a minute. Hold on. We're seeing a continuation of the Obama administration. We're seeing Joe Biden's administration reflecting the previous administration and amplifying it. And so you all know that Obama had used the IRS to prosecute journalists. Dinesh D'Souza specifically comes to mind, but others as well. The media said all kinds of stuff about Trump. I've brought up articles in the past about this. But the reality is that Trump wasn't really that hard on the media. But Obama basically barred journalists from covering him and all kinds of things, just like Lori Lightfoot just now did, based on racial identity. Which to me is quite scary. Quite scary, because they get away with it, and it's fine. You mention anything about it, you're a supremacist. You're a Whyte Supreme Pizza. Utterly ridiculous and a bunch of nonsense. So, sorry guys, I'm trying to find this link I had because I guess it didn't want to work. I don't know why. Might just be Opera. See if I can get it up here again. Aha, there it is. Interwebs and the computers. Always doing fun stuff. You never know with the live stream. All right, guys. Here we go. From Conservapedia. The old Obama riots. So, overview. Date, 2009 to 2016. Interesting how these commies in the background here are pictured. Yet, Mr. Lafree, Dr. Lafree, I should say, was unable to see that Antifa had existed before 2016. You know why that happens? That happens because he's an ideologue. So it says the Obama riots, sometimes referred to as the Obama War on the Police. Interesting. Has there been a war on police lately? I know Jen Psaki is now saying that, well, it's the Republicans that want to defund the police because they didn't pass the bill. They didn't pass the bill that we wanted them to pass. Yet not a single Republican has mentioned defunding the police. And for anyone out there who might be listening later, it's not a regular listener or anything, if you've made it this far to the stream, right? I'm not a Republican. I've been an independent for a long time. Now, I was once a registered Republican, but I consider myself a classical liberal. I'm more toward the libertarian ilk. I'm a minarchist. I really like the ideas of anarcho-capitalism, but I think they're utopian, just like communism is. So there you have it. All right, so let's read some of this real quick. The Obama riots, sometimes referred to as the Obama War on the Police, were a series of radically motivated conflagrations that erupted nationwide, particularly in the last half of the Obama presidency, in his second term, that is. Initially elected as America's first post-racial president. Yeah, he was, and then he said Trayvon Martin could have been his son, and then he said that some cop was an idiot for stopping a guy breaking into his own home. Now, mind you, the cop probably could have handled that better, because I've had to break in some old homes of mine in the past myself. But still, the professor that did this acted like an idiot even more so, because all he had to do was say, "Sir, I completely understand why you're here. This is my home. I'll show you my ID and everything. We can get this sorted out." But that's not what happened. It became something stupid. And it says post-racial president also because in the early 2000s, this discussion of race kind of faded off. I don't want to say completely, but it just wasn't a big deal. And in fact, it's why Obama got elected, because a bunch of white people felt guilty. And they were like, if I vote a black man, I'm okay. I'm cool now. I'm cool. Look, I voted a black person in. The stuff people do, it drives me nuts. It's like, be yourself, be authentic. Stop doing what everyone else wants you to do. Drives me nuts. And, anyways, whatever. Many African Americans become increasingly disillusioned as Obama's presidency progressed. Critics charged Obama personally inflamed the rioters and lawless elements responsible for the destruction of property, businesses, jobs in several American cities. The Obama administration either deliberately to further Marxist revolution or indirectly through subterfuge, naivete, destroyed decades of improvements in race relations in the United States. So, these are sourced. Wait for that to come up. In any case, this was not just right-leaning journalism as well. This was all over the spectrum. No, don't want to work. No worries. We'll just stay here. Pat Cattle and Doug Schoen, I guess. I don't know. Schoen. You guys, you got to know I'm dyslexic. I can't read names. Noted earlier on the Wall Street Journal, rather than being a unifier, Mr. Obama has divided America on the basis of race, class, and partisanship. Mary Frances Berry, former head of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, acknowledged that the Obama administration attempted to polarize America around the issue of race as a way of diverting attention from the anemic recovery and other issues. Aha. But the anemic recovery was purposeful as well. Again, speculation. Seems to be, though. Seems like Trump got it recovered pretty quick. Yet we're implementing Obama-style policies once again. Says they further state President Obama's division approach to the governance has weakened us as a people and paralyzed our political culture. There were at least 5 Obama riots: Oscar Grant riot, Trayvon Martin violence, Manuel Diaz violence, Kimini Gray riots, and the Baltimore riots. Additionally, 5 Dallas policemen and 3 Baton Rouge policemen were murdered during Obama's open season on police. Right, and again, this doesn't bring up the terrorist attack on Steve Scalise, and it doesn't, I might be wrong about the names here. It might be Manuel Diaz. I'm not sure, but it doesn't say anything about Anaheim or the things going on there, so I don't remember all the names of everything because this stuff was a long time ago. But overview, over here we have a list of the combatants: the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Organization for America, Black Lives Matter, Revolutionary Communist Party, Democratic Socialist of America, Party for Socialism and Liberation, Socialist United Party, Workers' World Party, Communist Party USA, Committees of Correspondence for Democratic Socialism, Sunrise Movement. And it's got the Democratic Party on here as well. And commanders, strength 50,000 to 230 million. So here it talks about this was the professor I brought up. President Obama toast Henry Louis Gates Jr. The president told the nation at a primetime news conference Gates was a close personal friend. Gates, a Maoist, is cited as inspiration for the 1999 communist apologetic Black Like Mao, Red China, and Black Revolution. And it has also the radical roots of Barack Hussein Obama. This is on Conservapedia. Folks, if you type in Conservapedia or you just type in Obama riots, at some point this will come up. So it goes through this, the Harvard professor, and the Harvard professor was an ass in this situation, not the cop. Now, the cop maybe could have handled it better, but the guy, look, if I was breaking into my house because I locked myself out and a cop stopped me, I would be thankful that he stopped a robbery that may have been versus me getting into my house. But I'm also white, technically at least, and because I'm white, technically at least, even though I'm a mutt of numerous origins, I don't know what it's like to be racially profiled and discriminated against. I'm sure the Harvard professor just feels the discrimination all the time. These people and their egos is insane. It says, by the end of President Obama's first year, a majority, 54% of voters believed the nation was on the wrong track, including among that 54% are nearly all Republicans, 91%, a majority of independents, 61%, and 1 in 5 Democrats, 18%. Those numbers are reflective almost exactly of what the numbers are today on people on critical race theory or on Joe Biden. I talked about this a few weeks back on the Interest for the Memes, if I'm not mistaken. This, my friends, says that we are the majority. 18% of the Democrats makes a majority. I can tell you that right now. And 61% of independents. By January 2010, only 13% of Americans said Obama had done better than they expected, finding just 27% of Democrats. I thought that was going to say 50% with the 13 there. Anyways. The Oscar Grant riots in 2009. Okay, that's probably what I was thinking about, because this case in Oakland, It was right. Anaheim, Oakland, they were all rioting around the same time. Shortly after President Obama's election, police officer, whatever, shot black transit passenger Oscar Grant in Oakland, California. Okay, so that was different. The Anaheim riots were about a dog that got released into a crowd that were picnicking, a police dog, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember this correctly. Again, this has been a very long time, guys. So 9 years ago now, I think. So Obama scapegoats an innocent Hispanic. Yes, Trayvon Martin. Trayvon could have been his son. I don't think so. Ferguson riots. Old Eric Holder. Anyways, we can keep going on and on and on and on with this, but I do need to get food, guys. Unless you guys are going to all bombard me with a bunch of donations all of a sudden over on Entropy, I'm going to get out of here. I failed in my 4 hours. But I'm not going to get out of here right away. I want to play this. If you guys haven't seen it, this is just amazing. From Judge Joe Brown. By the way, if you guys don't know, quite frankly, if you don't watch Frank, he's supposed to have Judge Joe Brown on in the future. And it made me, I was watching him, he said that he was going to have him on as an interview soon. And it made me think of this clip.
Number 44 and the one before that, 43, Bush and Obama. Well, there are pictures of Bush with his arm around 8-year-old Barack Obama because his stepdaddy, adopted daddy, Lolo Sotoro, had done a lifetime worth of business with the Bushes. Wow. Uncle George Herbert Walker, after whom George Herbert Walker Bush, Bush 1 president, was named, founded Halliburton in 1946 in Oklahoma. And Lolo Sotoro had been international executive vice president for Standard Oil.
There was talk of him being a CIA asset.
Well, yeah. See, he ran the death squads for the Indonesian army. On his own call, anyone could be assassinated. So when George Herbert Walker Bush became head.
Before he gets into the Bush connection, guys, do you think that Lolo Santoro, Obama's father, basically, not his real dad, but his stepfather at the time, you think he didn't pick up some of these tactics? Barack Obama's entire life was based around communism, and he was deeply implanted as a puppet figure because he believed in these things, and they knew they could get him in. But his election should also tell you how rigged the system actually is, because once they chose him, there was no stopping it. He was a juggernaut. And it was all based on the idea of white guilt, that he was a black man and we could heal the nation's racial problems with putting a black man in power. And what happened? The opposite happened. It got worse. It really did. And now we're focusing on that more. We're focusing on racial supremacy from the left, or just minority, any sort of minority supremacy, which, folks, you know, any more than I want the majority to oppress the minority, I definitely don't want the minority to oppress the majority. That's ridiculous. That's also a conflict that is beyond measure, because it's easy to oppress minorities. The majority to be oppressed takes a highly technocratic, militaristic state. And that's what we're looking at moving toward. That's why all the CRT stuff is scary. If you didn't know, it's not because your children are going to go to school and find out that they're racist, or if they're black kids told that they have no chance in life. That's not the scary part about it. The scary part about it is the division that it causes, and that it is meant literally to prop up people based on immutable characteristics as the ruling class, and other people to submit to their control. That, again, is a way to destroy and weaken and bring a society to a absolute collapse. And when that happens, then the real masterminds will step in. Then the real strongman will come. And then the real horror will happen. And that's when the political purges will come. I mean, they're always coming. They're always coming. But I mean the deep, deep purges. And trust me, we don't want any of this here. Hopefully, peaceful divorce is about to happen, considering that, I don't know, my state of West Virginia is not allowed to be visited by California employees, California governmental employees, that is. We're on the list because we don't have proper LGBTQ laws. Cool. I don't want your commie butts here anyways. So, fine with me. Anyways, let's keep playing this.
Head of the CIA under the Ford administration, he just got with his old buddy in the oil business, Lolo Sotoro, and pulled off the hits. See, Barack's grandmother has been acknowledged as being the woman that operated the channels through which CIA money went to the Southwest Pacific. So she introduced her daughter, who had just had Barry, Barack, to Lolo Sotoro, and they got married, and Lolo Sotoro adopted Barack Obama. The name was changed to Barry Sotoro. Now, when he went to high school in Hawaii, I know about that high school. I almost sent my oldest son to it. I could afford it, but I didn't think he deserved it. 20 years ago, the tuition was $95,000 a year, not including room and board. When Obama went there, I've talked to two of his classmates. They independently state that the tuition, not including room and board, was $45,000. Now, Business Insider reports his income for 2017 at over $200 million net. That's after taxes, deductions, write-offs. For this last year, 2018, they reported it as $570+ million. And that's after all deductions, tax, right? Trump doesn't make that net.
$570 million. How do you think that happened? You think that's all just speeches and book signings? That's doing things behind the scenes, guys. That's like all the stuff Joe Biden's been doing, but he's too dumb to have done it covertly.
I mean, even some of the richest people in America don't make that. Why? Because when his stepdaddy died, he was one of the 10, 15 richest men on earth. And he left everything in a trust fund operated out of Indonesia so the American government can't touch it. That makes Barack Obama 1/3 beneficiary for the assets of one of the 10, 15 richest men on earth. See, so we got a game run on us. So, you know that little thing that Bush W does when he gets with Michelle, they giggle and he gives her candy. The inside thing, is that supposed?
So if you didn't see, there's a little picture there, if you're not watching, you're listening, where Bush is putting a piece of candy in Michelle Obama's hand.
Supposed to be the same kind of candy he used to give to her husband when he was 6, 7, 8 years old.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club.
And that's absolutely 100% correct. We're not in it. So, guys, that's about it for me for today. It's nearly 8 p.m. I appreciate those of you who did donate. I know not everyone can, but it is greatly appreciated. That will help me and my family out. Of course, right now, I think I don't even know what I have sitting on over in Entropy. But I have some money that I should probably cash out because, we've been doing a lot of spending for the baby lately. So, but thank you all for joining. Sorry that the stream didn't go earlier as it was intended to. In fact, I think I'd have had more viewership then, but such is life. Such is life. And I will try to be back maybe next Friday. I want to talk to Aiden because I want to get Aiden Paladin on and see if she will be available then. I want to talk about some CRT stuff. And then also Christian. Let me bring him up real quick so you guys can see his channel. Now, Christian's a very intelligent guy, talks in academic terms, so he may not be your speed. Not calling any of you guys stupid or anything either. Just saying, like, not everybody is down to be listening to, $100 words all the time. So let's see. So this is his channel. Of course, I'm not logged in. I am subscribed to him. I'm not logged in here. And he just had a live stream earlier today. And I guess it's not up here yet, but it will be back around. In any case, he talks about CRT a lot, breaks down the philosophical problems with it. And actually his stream was the Moral Panic episode 2. So I'm going to be trying to get in touch with him after I was on there. I was toward the end. So if you guys are interested to see what I had to say, I didn't say anything I don't normally say, but happened to be on there for a second and reached out to him. So hopefully we'll start a relationship because I like the approach he's taking. Now me, I take a different approach, but many different voices, folks, many different voices from many different angles is how we beat this thing. If we can beat it. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but let's not be overconfident as well. Let's be realistic. Let's understand where we stand right now in the world and that the institutions are utterly corrupt. They are not for you. They are for those individuals in those institutions. The cathedral, as the NRX would say, the Dark Enlightenment, they would be only about their own power and their own wills. They don't care about you in society. Joshua Ham says, I'm looking into running for local office. It looks like becoming a politician is the quick route to wealth. Yeah. Well, Judge Joe Brown said he inherited that, but I guarantee you he made business connections behind the scenes as well. There's a whole long interview with that. It's really hard to find. Really hard to find. I can only find little brief clips. But I wanted to show you guys that. I had more that I wanted to talk about, but hey, this is how live streaming goes. And I appreciate, once again, the donations made. I will try and keep you guys abreast. If I do stream with Aiden, we won't be going through OBS. We'll be doing StreamYards. So if that is the case, hopefully we won't have the technical difficulties. But with all that said, guys, I appreciate you all watching. I appreciate, again, the donations. And I'll try to be back next Friday. This is going to be hit or miss. I will be on the Unjustified the Memes this coming Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, as always. And until then, I guess I'll have to see you guys around in other chats I participate in. So with all that said, folks, this has been All Minus One. My name is Bill, and I